Check, check. That means. Yeah, turn that down. Oh, I hear it. Artist.
I'm the fourth generation here. My kids are the fifth that have grown up here helping out. We were looking for a place that we could sell our hogs, the few hogs that we had. Niman was a perfect fit for that, and they've helped us grow over time. They've been a great partner. Well, the last 20 years of partnership has meant that I kept raising hogs. It's a fulfilling endeavor. I think that's what Niman has brought to the table. I want to provide a great, high-quality product for families. And I think that's very important in the connection we can make with the families.
A lot of the farms are families, and we see that at the Niman Ranch dinners when we get to meet a lot of them, and they're just good people that want to do good work. And they want to produce a good product, they want to be kind to the animals, they want to be humane, they want to have sustainability for farming, and that's what I've enjoyed about the connection with Niman, seeing the hardworking families and the good people involved in it.
I know groups like Niman Ranch and others are connecting with young people that are interested in continuing in farming. All across Iowa and the nation, it's important that we have young farmers coming back, especially the small operations, and allow them to innovate and develop their own entrepreneurial spirit and see what they can do in the future to make agriculture even better.
Good morning, everyone. If you could take your seats, we're going to get started. This is a really exciting day. For those of you who don't know me, I am Danny Nierenberg. I am co-founder and president of Food Tank, which is a research and advocacy organization devoted to telling stories of hope and success in food and agriculture systems, both internationally and domestically. And that's why I'm so excited to be here today. Niman is a huge success story in our food and agriculture systems, and we have a great day ahead of you of panels and fireside chats and really wonderful videos like the one you just saw. So today is going to be a great day, and I'm really excited to be here in person with you all. It's been a long time, so let's give being in person a round of applause. I think we need it. I urge you all to use the hashtag HFAD, HFAD, to share your thoughts and comments throughout the day. We'll be reposting those on the Niman platform and on Food Tank so we can share your thoughts and suggestions or criticisms, anything you have to say, because we really want to hear from all of you. Before we dive into today's program, I'm really, really honored to welcome Don Sherman of the Lakota, Shawnee, and Delaware tribes and the CEO of Native American Natural Foods, Tonka Bar. In 2020, Niman Ranch partnered with Native American Natural Foods, and that partnership has since blossomed into this really, really cool and beautiful relationship. You'll have a chance to learn more about Dawn's work later today, but she will help us start the day by giving a land acknowledgement. So thank you so much, Dawn. Do you need the podium? Do you want the podium?
Oh, no, I don't need the
Great.
Matakyape, hello, my relatives. My name is Don Sherman. My Lakota name is Satatwe Naji Wia, which means protects her home. But today, before we get started, I just want to welcome everybody. Such beautiful faces out here, and meeting you, it's just been very exciting. But before we move forward, we always want to recognize indigenous land that you're standing on right now. So the people of this land were the Ioways, which most people know them as the people of the Gray Smoke. And part of that was because their huts were covered in snow, and with the soot and ash, the roofs were gray. So that's kind of how that came about. It's also the land of the Sac and Fox and of my people, the Oglala Lakota Nation. So as you're standing here, just recognize where we're from and give Unchimaka a little bit prayer for what she's done for us in the return. So thank you.
I also want to take a moment to thank everyone for being here today. Again, it's so great to see you all in person. I'm really excited to be back in Des Moines because it's been a while. And I want to thank all of those of you who are watching virtually. We really appreciate you getting up early on a Saturday morning. Everyone who is here today and watching virtually has made a strong commitment to supporting independent family farmers. And I want to give special thanks to the Marriott staff, including their food staff, especially their food staff, for hosting today's event. And I want to thank our incredible collaborator, Niman Ranch. This is their event. This is their baby. They have done such a wonderful job for so many years to put this together, to bring independent family farmers together and to celebrate and honor and respect them. So please, again, let's give them a round of applause for all the great work that they do. And again, the hashtag is HFAD, HFAD, so please share your thoughts. So, Niman Ranch is very personal to me. I was first introduced to Niman Ranch after meeting Paul Willis years ago. I'm not going to tell you how many. There's no reason you need to know. And it was really at the beginning of my career when I was studying both the impacts and the benefits of sustainable livestock production and also the costs of industrial livestock production around the world. And I saw Paul speak at an event, like many of you, and instantly became enamored by this charismatic farmer who really, really cared about pigs and really, really cared about the future of our food and agriculture systems. And so since then, I've been writing about or interacting with Paul, as much as I could. He has truly, truly changed my life and my perspective around livestock production. All of us in this room and all over the country who care about building a better system of raising animals stand on the shoulders of Paul Willis and all that he has done. It is one of my greatest honors to call him a friend. Let's give him a round of applause so I try not to cry. And I hope Paul will join me on stage. Yay, Paul is great. So, Paul, we've been doing this for a long time. I don't think you knew when you met me you'd be stuck with me for this long.
Well, I'm really happy that's the way it's gone. Sure.
No, I'm happy that's the way it's gone. So, I think my first question for you is, what has it been like to sort of watch Niman Ranch evolve and grow? This is your creation, and I'm wondering, as you look back, what's that been like for you?
Well, it's been exciting. I mean, every part of it, including more farmers and more small and mid-sized farmers, keeping them on the farm, keeping them raising pigs in this, humane manner. It really created a different dynamic for farming for me.
Yeah.
You were going along, doing what you did, and then as this started, things really got exciting.
And that different dynamic, here in Iowa, we see a very different system of how most folks raise hogs. And so that different dynamic, you were going against a lot of opposition. So that must have been, something in the 90s to be doing that.
Well, it was really thinking that, I didn't want to go that way. I didn't want to raise pigs in an industrial sort of setting. And thinking, what we were doing was becoming more unique by the day.
Right.
Farmers were going out of business, and pasture-raised pigs, which was very common throughout the entire Midwest, everywhere. In fact, before confinement buildings had been sort of invented, so to speak,
right.
Everybody raised pigs in that manner.
Right.
And so it wasn't what we were doing, it was what we weren't doing. And we became more unique by the day.
That's great. One of the things that I know has been really important to you is your work with the Animal Welfare Institute to help lead the creation of the first animal welfare standard for pigs. And I'm wondering if you can talk about that.
Well, I met Diane Halverson from the Animal Welfare Institute, and it was a meeting, people concerned about industrial production moving in, and everybody was making comments here and there, and Diane stood up and said, well, what about the animals? And I thought, that's it. That's what really everybody wants to say, but it seemed like we shouldn't really, bring that up.
Sure.
But in fact, she had already worked in Minnesota and they had a little farm there, and they were trying to, do something similar to what we were doing. And I said, well, we need to get together, and through that, we needed to create some standards. I said, come to my farm, let me know if we're doing things according to what animal welfare should be, and if we're not, let's fix it. And then from there, we worked with Diane and wrote the standards, which are pretty much still used today.
Absolutely.
A few tweaks here and there, but yes.
And I remember talking to Diane, during that time, and it was so exciting to see that sort of momentum build. Why do you think we still need these sorts of standards, though? I mean, because a lot of people are saying that we don't.
We need to, I'm sorry, we need to what?
Why do we need to continue having these standards?
Well, the standards really distinguish us as, we are something different. We're unique compared to the industry in general. And in fact, my goal was to distance myself as far as possible.
Sure.
We have a niche market, and so we have to be unique. And high animal welfare is one of the pillars of that.
Absolutely. For those folks who are watching, I know a lot of people in this room know what those sorts of high animal welfare standards are, but what does that mean?
Well, in our case, it means for a pig to be a pig, live outdoors, be able to build a nest, live in communal, they're social animals, live in groups, allow the sow to be able to make a nest when they're going to have baby pigs.
Sure.
They're not be on cement slats in a confinement situation. Not be in a gestation stall, but in social settings for pigs. All of those things.
Letting pigs be pigs.
Let pigs be pigs, yes.
That's great.
Exhibit their natural behavior, yes.
Absolutely. So to shift gears a little bit, I've had the pleasure of interviewing you and Alice Waters together on stage, Chef Alice Waters. And it's such a great story of how you met and worked with her and other amazing chefs, especially in San Francisco, but really all over the country. And I'm wondering why the recognition of chefs has been so important to you personally and to Niman Ranch.
Well, I certainly have to give credit to Bill Niman in San Francisco, who started Niman. It was Niman Shell at the time, but he started supplying clean-raised, quality meat products, beef, lamb, and pork. A little bit of pork that he, from California, and it was mainly to supply restaurants in the San Francisco area. When I started this, I knew you had to identify a market where people would be interested in this. And the West Coast at that time had a food culture, and I knew that was probably a better market at the time than really here in the Midwest.
Sure.
And so Alice Waters was one of the chefs that Niman was supplying in the early days, and I guess one of the highlights was really when I went to the restaurant. They do their menu every day, and it said Willis pork on the menu.
So great.
It was thrilling.
It is thrilling. It's so cool still to this day. So maybe this is an uncomfortable question for me to ask you, but I'm wondering how you think, how you think Niman Ranch has changed over the years. What are you pleased generally? What would you like to see happen more?
Well, I'd like to see more farmers included in the Niman Ranch. Under the Niman Ranch umbrella, we're looking for more farmers. I think it's still an opportunity for young people to get started. It requires a certain size to be able to access certain markets and so on, and we've been able to accomplish that to a certain point. Yes, it's still an opportunity, and even though we're small in the big picture, we are out there for other farmers to be part of this.
Absolutely, and I think what interests me a lot is that you can scale up, but what's interesting about Nyman is you've scaled out and you know, really been able to include lots of different kinds of farmers who were doing industrial practices before, who wanted to change over, who wanted to get out of that vicious cycle.
Yes, there's some of that. Also, there are oftentimes the next generation that wants to continue in farming, that can expand an operation on an existing farm. There at different parts of the country, we're looking to possibly have people raise feeder pigs in the south. Mm-hmm. You know, broaden our base that way.
Sure. There's so much opportunity there, and we'll hear a lot from young farmers later today. And I wonder what your advice for people who are just starting in farming and who want to raise pigs, and you talk to them every day, but, you know, for those listening virtually, you know, young farmers who face a lot of obstacles, which we will talk about later, but, you know, what is the opportunity for them here to be involved in Nyman?
Well, raising Nyman Ranch livestock is generally a low capital requirement. You need some buildings and so forth, you know, but it isn't a $250,000 outlay or something right up front to put up an industrial building. So you can grow into this. You can start small. I always like to say we don't want to discriminate against small farmers.
Sure.
And often some of your small farmers have the opportunity to grow and they become middle-sized farmers or are able to grow and expand their operation. But it's a way to start somewhere.
Absolutely.
It may not be how you're going to make a living, but it can be an enterprise on a diversified farm.
Absolutely.
It's
absolutely.
one of a number of things. And diversity, too, I think is really healthy.
Absolutely. Diversity. I heard Carrie McClyman, who you work with closely, say this before. We need, diversity on farms of growing different things, raising different things, but we also need a more diverse group of folks who are involved in farming too. And that includes young people and black and brown folks and a whole range of other people who need to be involved in this kind of operation.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
So that's one of the things I've appreciated since knowing you, that diversity that you bring into this conversation. Paul, you've been doing this for many, many years, and as we sort of end our conversation this morning, what are your hopes and dreams for Nyman? You talked about scale, you talked about getting more farmers, but this is still a small company that not a lot of folks know about. What do you hope happens over the next 2 or 3 years?
Well, I'd like to see the the number of farmers, as I said, continue to grow, expand the base for geographically, in other ways. I'd like to still to remain as an opportunity for new people to get into this, and anyway, to be around, be something that's better for the animals, better for the farmers and the land.
Absolutely.
And the customer, ultimately.
It is. You've created this legacy of having an operation that's good for animals, good for people, and good for the planet. So I want to thank you for all of your hard work. It's always amazing to talk to you, and it is my true honor to know you. Let's give Paul Willis a round of applause.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I want to thank Paul. What a great conversation to kick off today's program. Again, Paul Willis is my hero, and I think he's the hero of so many of us in this room. Now we get to view 2 videos, one from Iowa State Representative and Nyman Ranch farmer Chad Engels, followed by Matt Russell, State Executive Director of the U.S. Department of Agriculture Farm Service Agency. And while these videos play, I'd like to ask our next panel to take the stage. I get to turn it over to Chloe Sorvino, who leads coverage of food and agriculture at Forbes and the author of the forthcoming book, Raw Deal, Hidden Corruption, Corporate Greed, and the Fight for the Future of Meat. She will be joined by Adrian Lipscomb, Ron Marsden, Catherine Miller, and Neil Hamilton. So let's give them a round of applause. Thanks, Paul.
I would like to welcome the farmers, customers, and friends of Nyman Ranch to Iowa for the 2020 Hog Farmer Appreciation Dinner. This is an event that Tammy and I look forward to every year. Of course, the great food, but getting to see old friends and making new ones is a really great part of it as well. Every year I come away having learned something besides having fun that really gets me going and re-energized for the next year. When I first started with Nyman Ranch, it kind of felt like a last resort if I wanted to keep raising pigs on a small farm without building a confinement building or working for somebody else. But over time, especially the last few years, it seems like opportunities for small and mid-sized farms is starting to grow and creating some excitement. In my first term in the Iowa legislature, I worked on a couple different things to kind of help benefit and create markets for small and mid-sized farms through a bill that created grants for meat lockers. Those meat lockers could look to expand or increase efficiency and provide services to more farmers and more customers. And that's kind of the things that we need to do in government, I think, behind the scenes to create more opportunities over time. I'm excited about that for small farms and small farm marketing opportunities. Kind of along that line, I see that Nyman Ranch farmers are uniquely positioned to lead on sustainable farming, and not only sustainable farming but regenerative farming, making that jump so we're just not maintaining, but we're renewing soil and soil health over time. I think Nyman Ranch farmers are willing to kind of think outside the box, use some maybe old or different practices, be a little different than their neighbors, like cover crops, adding more small grains, different rotations, adding more livestock to the land, just some different things that maybe our neighbors aren't doing. But Nyman Ranch farmers can lead on that, and I really believe it, and I'm looking forward to seeing that over time. I hope you all have a great time at today's event, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all in the future.
Hello, Nyman Ranch. It is great to be with you here in Iowa this weekend. I want to thank all the farmers, the staff, the customers, and the partners for all that you do to develop the opportunities for small and medium-sized farmers in Iowa, around the Midwest, and even throughout the entire United States. There is indeed a very bright future for small and mid-sized family farms. What we really need is the diversity, the innovation, and the management that small and medium-sized family farms provide. Diversity. We have to have diversity on the landscape. Diversity of livestock, diversity of cropping systems, and diversity of those family farms themselves. The innovation. We have to have farmers who are willing to innovate, to take the risks, and develop things that either don't exist or that can exist better. And then finally, management. None of this happens unless you have people who are talented, committed, and invested in management practices that help develop all these opportunities. So yes, there's a very bright future for small and mid-sized family farms, like the very farms that are part of the Nyman Ranch network. But we don't just get there unless we invest in it. We have to make it happen. And if we don't, it simply won't. So thank you, Nyman Ranch, and all of your partners and farmers and customers that are making it happen. And I also want to say that I'm very proud to be part of the Biden-Harris administration, who is also making a big investment in these kinds of farming operations. And we're also hiring. I never speak to anybody without letting them know that all across this country in rural communities, USDA is hiring agricultural leaders to partner with farmers and ranchers. So thank you for all you do, and it's been absolutely wonderful to be with you this weekend.
All right. All right. Thank you all so much for being here. We are here to talk about how small farms can still make a really big impact, especially on the rural economy, and how systems like Nyman Ranch can effectively push for change at scale. there was an impact report that Nyman Ranch published that many of you have or you've seen around, and I want to pull out 2 stats just to kick us off with that. So for every $1 million in direct sales, Nyman Ranch farms produce 14 jobs and generate an additional 1.03 million in additional economic output. And so bringing that, comparing that to more conventional farms, for every 100,000 hogs, a conventional producer hired 115 workers and generated $36 million in value. Nyman Ranch, for the same amount of hogs, hired 290 workers and generated $60 million in value. So that's about double the impact and pretty significant. So that's what really we're here to talk about today. And Ron, I want to bring it to you to start off because you led the focus groups on these panels and with the farmers. And so what's the most overlooked impact that we should understand?
Wow, that's not exactly a soup question, is it? But I'm tickled to be here, and I'm tickled to see so many people out here. That's a good question, that's a valid question, and that's a strong question. I think that, like for instance, in my lifetime, I have seen the transformation of Iowa from a successful, thriving group of communities that were stimulated and founded and built on successful, thriving independent family farms, step down or slip into the culture we see today, which I call a monoculture of primarily corn, soybeans, and hogs from the mega producers. Is it produced more efficiently? Is it produced cheaper? I let that up to other people smarter than me to decide. What I do know has happened is that sections of land, which is a mile by a mile, at one time were teeming with farm families and with livestock and a diversity of crops and stuff, are gone. I mean, I firmly believe that independent family farmers raising a diversified group of animals, caring for those animals in a humane way, are what we need to get back. This morning I was down in 7 by the Windows, which is a staging place where Nyman has all of its stuff for the event stored. And I looked out the window and I saw a young couple, Aaron and Hannah Williams, pushing a baby stroller down Locust. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about Aaron and Hannah Williams. Aaron is a second-generation Nyman Ranch hog farmer who has come back to the farm. His wife and he have been married for a little over 2 years, and they were pushing their son Lowell in the stroller. The reason I know that is because as a Nyman Ranch farmer, I am well aware of my other partners in this cause and my friends in this theme. His dad, Bruce, and his wife were good friends of Denise and mine. I watched Aaron grow up. I watched him make the conscious decision to come back to the farm, to support it, to build it, and to maintain it. And it's kids like that, guys, and I'm getting to the point in life where I can say kids to a lot more people than I used to. But it's kids like that that get me up in the morning. It's kids like that that I want to see the trends that are so strong and so ingrained in society right now. I want to see them slowed down, and I want them stopped. And ladies and gentlemen, it's folks like Nyman, and it's folks like you, for that matter, that understand that, appreciate that, and get that.
You told me that it's imperative that rural communities don't slip further. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? Like, what do you mean by that?
Well, when I think of a vibrant rural community, I think of a community that in a lot of ways can be self-sufficient. It's a community that has its own filling station. It's a community that has its own grocery store. It has active civic organizations. It has active churches. It has a bank. It has a hardware store. And it is able to attract people from the surrounding area into it, and it's able to allow the people that live in that community and work in those businesses to have a successful business. And what we're seeing now, as we see the consolidation in agriculture, as we see the population base get smaller and smaller and smaller, the abilities or the opportunities for these communities and these businesses within these communities to live and to thrive is drying up.
Yeah, well said. So the degradation of the rural economy really has, as you've been saying, gone hand in hand with this increase of monoculture, a huge reliance on harmful inputs, and severely threatening biodiversity. I want to open this up to the panel. Why have more folks not transitioned, and how has the degradation of the rural economy impacted you in your work?
Who wants to go first? I have seen this over the last couple of years. I had the privilege to work on the impact report with Nyman Ranch and also on the true cost of food report with the Rockefeller Foundation over the last couple of years. And I think people don't make the transition because it is hard for them to access the necessary capital, the technical support, right? It is hard for them to make transitions in silos or by themselves when systems don't support it, right? Our food system, the Rockefeller report that we worked on last year says that, essentially we're spending $2 trillion on food, right? When in reality we should be spending 3 and 4. And the costs, and that's not to mean that it's more the higher prices are demanded, but how we spend that money differently. How we invest in values-based purchasing, how we invest in communities, how we provide the technical support and the systemic support for people to expand will help them make the transitions more readily. And to Ron's point, help support a growing piece, right? Chloe, as that report said, and you pointed out at the very beginning, a Nyman producer produces almost 2 to 1 jobs for a traditional producer. And those are the people that give back on the main street. Those are the people that deposit the money in the bank, buy at the cafe, support the restaurant. And so that type of economy is what we need to build up. But it's not gonna necessarily happen if they're left to do it one by one with no systemic supports, technical education, and access to different types of capital.
Yeah, appreciate that.
I think part of the reason that it's difficult for people to make the transition is how locked they are into the systems that we've created. And particularly if you think of corn and bean production in Iowa. And one of the great things about the creation of the Nyman system was that it gave people the opportunity to continue to farm the way they were and to be able to expand that kind of traditional form of pork production, as Paul talked about. And so if you aren't in that situation where you've already doing something different, then the idea of kind of leaping out of the pot and trying it is, the whole system is set up in many ways to keep you in.
I'm going to jump on the access part, access and knowledge of how to jump out of the pot or get out of the box. And that is very difficult to do if you do not have access to the capital or to the knowledge or to the mentorship to be able to do so.
We were talking earlier, Adrienne, I want to stick with you for a second. There's this concept of food sovereignty that's going around, and I think it's really important for local communities to better understand what that means. And you said it's a concept that's misunderstood earlier. Can you explain that a bit more?
Yeah, food sovereignty is not just a way of creating of food, but it's also the culture and being allowed to grow the food of your culture in your local environment.
Yeah.
And so that is very hard to do, just by what we see now. I live in a city where you see 99% of the food is from distributors that come into that town, so from other areas. So when you think about the dollar, it doesn't really stay in my city. So those are the things that we have to really evaluate, especially when you're talking about money and economy and how do you keep that dollar there. And if you have those local farmers that are providing and you're giving that dollar stays longer within your city and your economy.
Yeah, and I just want to say that your background is so amazing. You're a chef and restaurateur, but you also have by trade, like a city planner and architect perspective here that you're bringing to this, which I think is really important to these conversations. And so as putting that city planner hat on, how can rural communities and cities surrounded by rural communities for that matter, better support access?
First of all, open the door. Right? Cities are larger cities are trying to constantly get bigger and to get noticed. And a lot of people do not think about the sustainability or even the legacy of what that city is leaving behind. And when you look at rural cities or rural towns or villages, you're also looking at the sustainability of what does that next generation do and what's going to be left there. And I think we're losing that. We're losing those ideas. I am in this to say, a kid can look at the future and be like, I just don't want to be a doctor, but I want to be a successful farmer too. So they should be across the board the same, because we need food to survive. So those are the steps. We all have to eat in some which way, and it starts with our farmers.
I really appreciate that. Neil, next one is for you. Your book, The Land Remains, is so exciting. I'm really excited about it. Everyone's going to get a copy of it tonight, and there's more over there. But it's really all about, like being a good steward of the land and just how you've seen this systemic change happen in your career. And, we're in Iowa right now, the state that's the largest contributor to the dead zone in the Gulf of any state. And so that's a really big deal. Can you talk about the shifts you've seen in your career and what lengths we still have to go?
Sure. Well, thank you. And the book that she's mentioning is this book, The Land Remains. You're all going to get a copy tonight on your chairs at the dinner. I want to thank Nyman Ranch and the good folks. But there's also a supply over on the table if you can't wait until this evening. And if you end up with a duplicate, take it home, give it to your public library, take it to the local high school, get it into people's hands. I've taught agricultural law for 40-some years in Iowa, and have seen a number of changes that have been challenging in terms of the way we've expanded commodity production, as we've had this and continuing infatuation with ethanol, for example. And the things that Ron and Paul have talked about, are very real in terms of the impacts on our communities. And that's in part what makes the Nyman story so important. There's a chapter in the book about the good food, good land connection that relates to the Nyman story. And the impact report, I really encourage you to read it, because it's so powerful in terms of what the Nyman system is offering to the state and to the land and communities. And the Nyman products are in many ways an invitation to a conversation, particularly for consumers, in terms of, well, so why is this better, right? Where did this taste come from? How is it that these values are reflected in this system? And why can't there be more alternatives like this? And, we have to find hope some places. I find hope in that the land's resilient. It's going to outlive us. And but I think we can find hope in models like the Nyman system.
Great. And so we're running out of time, unfortunately, but I have another one for Catherine. Land prices have gotten crazy across the Midwest, but particularly in Iowa. We can't create change if there's not fair and equitable pricing happening. How do you think we should be attacking that problem?
Yeah, I think a lot of this actually comes down to policy change, and that is a hard thing to say in different environments, right? Because we don't want to get involved in policy, right? But the Nyman report, the impact report, gives every single farmer and rancher the talking point they need to make the case for a better system, right? The jobs, the economic growth, the Main Street capital. And we also, the Nyman model gives us the opportunity to talk about our communities, to name the people next to us and bring them along with us, as Adrienne suggests, right? And so land rights and land access and land capital, a lot of that actually sits in the power of our policymakers, right? At the state and federal level. And we have the biggest opportunity that we get every 5 years in the Farm Bill, right? Those hearings have started, those negotiations have started. And if folks that are doing these great models, right, and are talking about value-based production, values-based purchasing, are not at those tables, we are going to lose another cycle of this, right? And so, I always, when I do panels like this, it's like, you have a voice, you should use it, and the only way that we are going to change the system, we are going to have, community discussions around land access, we are going to get access to new capital, is if we use our voice in a policy perspective.
I so appreciate that. For our last minute, let's just do a rapid fire based off that. What is one policy you like seeing the Farm Bill, Nutrition Conference, otherwise, that you think would impact meaningful change?
Well, I'm going to do this. This is quick. It's quick. We're running out of time. But I had a good friend, Chris Oliviero, that said this best. What is the true cost of cheap? What are we paying actually for cheap? Everybody needs to be aware of that, and everybody needs to recognize that.
I would tell everybody in this room and every farmer that's doing things in some ways the Nyman way or the values-based way or the community-based way to start telling that story even more, right? You think you know it, your neighbors know it, but not everybody knows it.
I guess what I'd say is that we need to listen to the land and quit believing the myths and the lies we tell ourselves about what a good job we're doing as stewards and actually embrace stewardship.
I would say bring everybody, because not just the farmer is affected. We have more than one voice in the room. We need to use it.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. We're out of time.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much to Chloe and all of the panelists. Before we transition to a keynote address from the really cool food ethnographer, Junjo Lee, we're going to watch 2 videos from Marcus Mister, the meat and seafood operations manager for Harris Teeter. I sat next to him and his partner on the plane. They were having a great time. And that will be followed by a special Nyman Ranch farmer vignette. Round of applause, everyone. Let's wake up.
The future is a bright one. The consumers' support of local industries is steadily growing. Consumers can really see where their food is coming from, and that creates a level of trust that is becoming more and more important in this day and age. We have a long-standing relationship or partnership with Nyman Ranch, and it's because they're passionate and they care about their business as much as we do. They truly value partnership. They do not enter into a situation looking for a quick fix. They want a partner to grow with. They know who they are and they hold to their values. The best part is they appreciate everyone they come in contact with, whether it's the farmer or a salesperson. In addition to all of this, they deliver a consistent, top-tier quality product that customers come back for time and time again.
I believe it's important to support the next generation of farmers because we need to carry on the traditions that we have been doing and not lose some of the great qualities that make Nyman Ranch Nyman Ranch. The best part of growing up on a farm is learning dedication and hard work and to never give up, to make sure the job is always done. With agriculture, I've learned all these different qualities that have really shaped me as a person. I'm looking forward to returning to the farm because I love the peace and quiet. And I love being with the animals. I love sorting hogs. I love grading hogs when they first come in. That's really what is driving me to pursue this. This scholarship will help me achieve my goals because by going to school, I'll get a further understanding in the building trades. And when I get out of college, I'm hoping to have an opportunity to buy some land, put up some hoop barns, and my biggest goal is to have 500 acres of crop ground and then have 2,000 head of pigs on hand at all time, Nyman Ranch pigs. I could see it growing a lot larger from there. I'd like to say a big thank you to all the Nyman Ranch donors. We really appreciate what you do for us, and I know Nyman Ranch really appreciates your dedication and support.
Hello, how is everyone? Yeah, I think there was some partying late at night. I heard someone open the door at around 2 o'clock next to us. So, yeah, let's wake up. So, my name is Junjo Lee, and I'm a food ethnographer. I study food culture, and this is my first time visiting Nyman Ranch's hog farms, and I fell in love with all of you yesterday. I have to say, it was amazing. So, this is my son, Blue Joe. I think I dyed my hair blue in honor of Blue. He is 24 years old now, and one of the oldest Gen Zs. How many of you have kids born between 1997 and 2012? Can you? Yeah. Some of you, maybe a quarter. How many of your kids came back home and lived with you recently? Mine did, yeah. So I have been studying Gen Z because I wanted to understand my own children. We would be at dinner and get into conversations that got heated. And our kids said, "Mom, Dad, you just don't get me. I can't talk to you anymore." And so as an ethnographer, I decided I would study their generation. And that's what I've been doing for the last 6 years. Blue Joe here is learning how to surf. And I think that is what it feels like to be Gen Z. They are in transition between old ways and new ways. And how does it feel how to surf? Does anyone know how to surf here? A few people. We are inland. Well, it's different from skateboarding because skateboarding, you have solid ground underneath you. When you're surfing, there's nothing but the wave, nature. And you are constantly adapting and needing to know and anticipate and expect change and adapt change. And you might plunge in. And as a parent watching my son learn how to surf, I just am rooting for him to make it back on shore. And I think that is what all of us feel. We're rooting for our kids to make it on shore. And I'm going to do, and all of you are doing everything you can to help them. Because our kids have inherited some pretty bad stories about their future and their life. And I think it's time that we have some better stories for Earth. And I witnessed it yesterday on the farm. Gen Zs are teachers of new ways. They are the most diverse cohort in US history. And if you think about APAC, 25% of Gen Zs are going to be 25% of the population of APAC are going to be Gen Z by 2025. They are meta-modern. And I described them this way before Facebook became Meta, so I don't know, I have to come up with a new word. But they are meta-modern. They are non-binary, non-hierarchical, full spectrum. And many Gen Zs are feeling that queerness is a default. They live in simultaneity. They inhabit both digital, in real life, and global realms. And in fact, they're merging with machines. No sort of digital detox for our Gen Zs. And they live on multiple timelines. They know how power works. And because of this, and because everything is transitioning for them between the old ways and new ways, they're really experiencing a lot of social suffering, anxiety, exhaustion, depression. And in fact, my son had called me 6 months ago and said, "Mom, I'm not doing well. I think I'm having a little bit of a breakdown." He was in his sophomore year back in 2018. And that's a really hard phone call to get. So this is our generation. Prudence here says, "I feel like crying all the time, but I don't have tears." Gen Zs are living in the instant global. They crave instant gratification for information, connection, and fresh food. Instant information is transparency. Food is really important to them, not just eating it, but cooking and cooking for their friends. Food is at the intersection of identity, culture, ideas about health and wellness, climate change, and social justice. This is Regina, and you'll note it's Austin in 2019. before the pandemic, before we all could have anticipated something like a global pandemic. And she said, life only climbs. Will it ever peak? She was really excited to start school. And it was actually Regina who taught me about BTS. How many of you are BTS fans? Yeah, there some. Yes, great. She said, BTS saved my life. You know, she was getting bullied in middle school. She was into manga and anime and actually she lives in Kyle, Texas. It's a sub-rural town about an hour outside of Austin, and she was getting bullied. And she said, you know, they saved my life. 27% of our workforce, global workforce, they will be by 2025. They're your current, and sorry for the typo, they're your current and future employees. I'm the resident food ethnographer at Google, and so I didn't fix that on my slides. This is Tyler in Denver. He had just graduated from high school, and he brought all his favorite beings for me in this picture. His PlayStation hot sauces. Hot sauces make the bland, repetitive, corporate more interesting. And Tyler is just looking for a green-collar job. He's looking for a job that will help, not hurt. He wants to be part of the solution. Gen Zs are our first digital natives. Digital life is actually delicious and nourishing. It's part of their self-care. Tammy, she is an intern at Google back in 2018, and she said, this is a dog. It's not even my dog. It's some dog from the internet, Instagram, and whenever I feel bad, I just look at the dog, and I feel better. How many of you do that? And then, of course, this generation who knew that they would be tagged by a global pandemic, evicted from their dorms, pivoted to hybrid, they entered the workforce remotely in 2020. The pandemic feels like love at the end of the world for me, says Twee, and this is her artwork on Instagram. And they've inherited this climate catastrophe, stories about extinction. Climate change is a terminal timeline. And this is Sophia. This is her sheep. She's sold it at the Pluma Sierra Junior Livestock Show for $2,200. I actually bid on this, bid on her sheep, and I lost. They held ghost auctions for livestock that had been killed during the fires, the Dixie fires. I don't know if you remember, but right as the pandemic hit in California, we had massive fires. People lost their homes, their livestock, and they still held an auction. So, who are Gen Zs? I started a multi-year Gen Z study for Google. So Google is interested in the health and well-being of their employees. And so we started a future Googler cohort 2 years ago. And I started interviewing Gen Zs right out of high school. These aren't all Gen Zs. They're a subsection of Gen Zs who want a career in tech and design and product management, and they are amazing. What they told me is they want more connection, caring more, and they want to help cure the broken systems that we're living in right now. The prompt we asked them, and one of the homework questions was, what is your nightmare fuel? Eating something I know caused harm to other people simply by consuming the food. How are you tasting climate? Climate tastes a lot spicier and a lot worse than it used to. And I really like this prompt. What role does beauty play in your world? Beauty is the aftermath of a storm. Lessons learned, being wiser, new successes and opportunities. And I just heard Paul was talking about his prairie. and how spectacularly beautiful his Prairie Way is. And I'm hoping I get invited tomorrow to go visit Paul's Prairie, because I heard it's truly spectacular. And yeah, I think we need new stories for Earth, for our kids, that heal the fragmentation, that cure the myth of separation that seems to be dividing all of us. And I'm going to skip a couple slides to the last one. Whoops. Here we go. So for Gen Z, the key takeaway, dystopia is now. It's doing nothing and its consequences. It's this world. A world with less to share, more unequal, more hurtful. The nightmare is being a cog in a machine that's producing more harm. The worst thing we can do is change nothing. Gen Z utopia is more connections, more caring. The best possible world is this one, but less harmful. Nature saturated, like a spectacular prairie way, pollinator pathways and habitats, changing. It's not a radical other world. The best world nourishes all of us. And I welcome Danny to the stage so we can have a bit of a conversation.
I'm so excited for this conversation. I've been waiting for weeks for it. Let's give her a round of applause. So as Junjo mentioned, she's a food ethnographer. She's the resident food ethnographer at Google, but she is also an author and the co-founder of the children's book company Readers to Eaters. And so she has this really interesting perspective on young folks that as you heard, I think we all need to hear about. So I guess maybe my first question for you is, you're here with a lot of people who care about food, who sell food, who buy food, who are really into, raise food. I think for them, maybe one of their questions, at least if I was sitting in the audience, would be, what is Gen Z looking for when they're making decisions about food? Because you explained all of these things that are going on in their minds. They're thinking very fast-paced. They're merging with technology, which I find so interesting. What kinds of decisions are they making about food?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, food is a way of connections and connecting with themselves, so inner development, as well as connecting with each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're looking for food that enables a diversity of experiences. So it's their primary way of connecting with the world beyond their first families, especially when they leave home, go to college, start school, start jobs.
It's really this point of their lives that brings them all together.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And that's, I think, so different from past generations. I wish my generation had been like that. That's what I sort of longed and hoped for. But this generation is really doing it.
They are. In a way, they're eating culture. So in order to just continue to discover, journey, and share, food is often the centerpiece of learning.
Can you dig more into this idea of what you said about their digital life is very nourishing?
Yeah. I remember a couple years ago, there were all these trends, fads on digital detox, and we had to do all these sort of weird things to kind of turn it off. And so, it was always this sort of fight against being too digital, and it wasn't good for us. And what I'm realizing now is they're the same age as Google. So Google was formed in 1998. They don't know a world without digital.
Right.
And digital enables more connections. And so they can see instantly what's happening around the world. And I would say, in some ways, they're more connected to people their age around the world than perhaps their own first families that they grew up with.
Sure. It's so interesting to me. And when I was talking to you before, I talked about how my stepchildren are very digitally, merged. That's their life, and that's okay. I think there was a time when my husband and I thought that was a problem, but I don't think it is anymore. Yeah. So, I did see sort of my stepkids suffer during the pandemic, and Gen Z has definitely had some challenges, and I'm wondering how that affected their eating habits, their connection with food, which has been so important because they use that as a connection with other people, whether it's online or in person.
Yeah, I think the way that they are suffering is a little different. So socially, they're open about it. They're connecting about it. It's no longer stigmatized. Food is actually what we found in our research. Food is a marker. So if someone cooks for themselves, it's actually a marker that they're doing okay, that they're doing well. Yeah, it's sort of, I heard pigs yesterday on the farm, when their tails are up and wagging, it means that they're emotionally, socially doing well. Cooking is a sign. So self-care is primarily, one of the first things you can do is sleep and cook. But then cooking for their friends, cooking for the families, cooking for others, I think is also a further sign of social wellness.
Makes their tails go up.
Makes their tails go up. Yeah, and it's also therapy. So
Sure.
when they're not feeling well, it's something that I've heard more and more Gen Z start doing
That's
as part
great.
of their self-care regime.
That's wonderful. That makes me feel very hopeful in so many ways, because using food is that sort of, food should be healing. We talk about food as medicine, but food should be healing.
Yeah, food is healing, curing, connecting. Food is caring more. They're looking for food that you all produce, really.
One of the things when we talked before this panel that I really liked is that you said Gen Z is more likely to embrace the gray area, that they're not judgy. They're not like my generation, like you're either omnivore or vegetarian or vegan, and if you're anything in between, I don't understand. They're less judgy about that. They want, more of this flexible kind of diet, and I think that's really, again, hopeful.
It's very hopeful. In fact, I think, the adage, tell me what you eat and I'll tell you who you are. It's sort of our way of doing research. Food is our portal to go in to understand deeper inner lives and social lives. But this sort of default to queerness, so non-binary, just sort of more ambiguous and interstitial spaces, I think, is how they approach food as well. So, if we think about food, traditionally it used to be very gendered. There was a very masculine way of eating and a feminine way of eating, and then that became dietary lifestyles. Food became a tool for making our bodies look a certain way, becoming high performers. We went through all these sort of dietary lifestyles, and now I think food is really returning back to us as our identity and expression of who we are and who we want to become. So I find it really exciting that they are going deep into the ambiguity, and which is really saying complexity and change and transition.
That's great, and I like what you said about food is helping them become who they want to be. And that's so important to, I think, all of these conversations that we're having here today.
Yeah, food is often a self-discovery tool. I've heard a lot of kids say, I became vegetarian or vegan when I was back in middle school, and I was exploring my identity and who I was. But it's not static. It's not like constant. I think they have a very creative and fluid approach to their identities, as well as what they eat. And so I think it's always constantly changing, and they are trying to engage with the larger system through their food choices and discoveries.
So we are here at the Niman Ranch Hog Farmer Appreciation Weekend. What's your advice for Niman Ranch folks?
You're already doing it. Keep doing what you're doing, and talk to your kids. Learn from your kids and your younger employees. I think they are my best teachers. So I'm not in a position of being an expert of anything anymore. How can I? Everything is changing radically, and so I'm in constant deep listening with the future generation who are coming of age right now.
I have to admit that I think that deep listening and listening to younger folks and listening to your children is hard for some people to embrace, and maybe hard for businesses to embrace. How do we sort of break down, as older folks, that barrier we have within ourselves to really listen and understand what young people have to say? Because I think there's a tendency to say, I've been through this, I know better than you.
Can any of us really say that, honestly? Like, do we know better anymore? I mean, everything is changing so radically. I would say that's really hard to believe anymore.
Sure.
Yeah. Deep listening is a practice that my husband and I have friendly arguments about all the time. Because I'm a listener and my husband's a talker. And so it is really, really hard.
Sure.
And when you listen, you listen for what's not said, not just what's said. So just being still and being curious and asking really good questions, I think. So asking good questions like, what is a dish or flavor that takes you right back home to a best good place? What does a warm hug taste like, feel like? You know, I think there's some really good questions we could start asking. And it's not like a rational conversation. It's really to connect with our hearts and emotions, I think, in the conversation.
So encouraging us to be curious and have that curiosity about folks who are younger than us. One of the things that I have learned over the last few years is, I've always looked for older mentors. Now I look for younger ones. And it's made my life incredibly open and happy in a way that learning from older mentors hasn't. And so I think that's something that we can all take away from this kind of conversation. One of the things that, you said in your slideshow, and I know that you think deeply about, is that Gen Z is particularly tech positive, and they want to work with new and emerging technologies and to address some of the challenges we're facing, especially the climate crisis. And so I'm wondering if, how we can talk about their views about technology and how we can engage with them, because not everyone in this room who's not, 25 or younger knows how to do that.
Yeah.
Knows how to use technology to communicate really well.
So I have a confession. I'm not on any social media. I really actually am not that techno-positive when it comes to my own, expression and connection with the world. So I don't think we all have to act in a certain way or adopt certain behaviors. But I think it's just not to actually, maybe this is a better way to phrase it. It's to be okay with being uncomfortable and to embrace discomfort and just stay with the trouble, stay with the ambiguity, stay with the newness of things, and be okay with that.
I think we all need to feel more uncomfortable than we do. I think it's a good thing. One of the slides that you showed earlier talked about how climate tastes worse, or Gen Z talks about the climate crisis tasting worse. Can we dig into that a little bit?
Sure.
What does that mean?
Well, I mean, they're instantly connected to what's happening all over the world. And I think they're struggling right now. There's a clock in Times Square in New York, and it's a climate clock, and it's counting down. And so in some ways they're saying, okay, I get it, like the world is ending in 7 years. They've been growing up with conversations around climate change. And I think they feel it, they taste it. It's just part of life. And some, responses are mixed. So some people are sort of like, it's too big. I can't really deal with it, think about it. So I'm going to live my best good life now. Some people are incredibly driven by anxiety and just, in some sense, paralyzed sometimes, not able to move forward. And some people, some Gen Zs are embracing it and saying, what can we do?
Sure.
How can we help? How can we be more helpful and less harmful? And, something that was really interesting when we asked these techno-positive, most of them are CS majors, a lot of first-generation, low-income students about the future, we didn't get stories like, oh, we're all going to go out there, away from Earth.
Sure.
They want to stay here. This is their Earth, and they just want to make it better. And they are expecting that corporations take responsibility for sustainability because they understand that it's a systemic problem. So as an individual, they can only do so much. And so they are looking for businesses, corporations, organizations to take that lead.
Sure. And
in order of awareness and priority in their lives, and these are a small group of 18-year-old subsection of the larger Gen Z, but techno-positive future Googlers, food waste and loss is their first awareness. Also fast food, fast fashion. And by fast, it's not just the ingredients of foods, it's the relationships of how people are treated in those systems.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then they're really curious about impacts on water and carbon, and e-waste started coming up. So fast tech and underutilization of technology.
So interesting. Yeah, no, it's great. And it's great that they're thinking in different ways. And you mentioned the private sector. And so again, we're with Niman folks. And you've already given them advice that they are doing the right thing. But when we talk about meat is often blamed for some of these things that Gen Z is so concerned about. And so how can we help them understand that when you're raising animals on pasture, do they get it? Do they get that they're storing carbon in soils, that farmers are trying to do things the right way?
I think they do. I mean, they have instant access to information, and that is transparency. And so I think they are starting to understand larger questions about the food system. And remember, they're non-binary. They are beyond sort of good and bad or judging. They're curious and they want to learn more, and they want to learn through a diversity of experiences. And so I would say continue to have dialogue and listen more than you talk. and be curious. But I think, and I wanted to talk about regeneration right now.
Of course.
Yeah. So I used to work for a consumer research firm. We did a lot of research for all the big brands and retailers, and fresh used to be a multifaceted marker of quality. So if a brand on their packaging or their communications could express fresher than the competition, they won. They were able to command, that's natural, organic, premium. Those all sort of local, raw. We saw all the food trends sort of ladder up into fresh. And currently we're starting to see regeneration. As regenerative eggs, regenerative this, regenerative that. It's sort of an open marker that people are trying to understand, and very multifaceted. So we don't really know exactly what it's starting to mean, except more connecting, caring, and connections to nature, to land, to plants, to animals. Sort of beyond an anthrocentric perspective. So I think it's for all of you to give meaning and better meaning to what regeneration is. And I think Gen Zs are so curious and eager and waiting to understand and learn and engage with food, which is the foundation of life for us. At least.
Great. So in the couple of minutes we have left, one thing that I know has been so important to you is your work with readers to eaters and really encouraging young eaters to experience new flavors and textures and all the things that come with food, understanding the cultures. I'm wondering how, what advice you have for parents and all of us who really, all of us interact with young people. So whether you're a parent or not, it doesn't matter. How we can encourage those who are younger than us to really embrace food very early on.
It takes great effort to teach our kids how to eat. Paul yesterday said Niman focused early on eating quality. I think that's really awesome. And I was talking to the farmers and to Niman people yesterday, like what does caring more taste like? And I'm curious if we could train our taste buds and our way of engaging with and understanding and tasting food. A friend of mine works for a flavor and fragrance company, Firmenich in Switzerland, and he said our palates are underdeveloped muscles.
Right.
We really don't know how to eat well.
Sure.
And so I think, it takes time. I'm Korean, and in Korean culture, tasting and eating and appreciating a wide variety of foods is the first lesson that we learn as little babies. And this whole thing, like, take your adventure bite, 3 bites and it's okay, never connects with Korean moms or grandmas. I mean, they will chase kids around and continue to introduce a diversity of full-flavored foods. And I know there's a hot sauce maker here in our audience I connected with on the bus, the Hog bus ride back. But don't you think it's curious that hot sauce is like so popular right now? I think it's because our food tastes bland. It has no taste. And it's also a reflection of our jobs, bland jobs, repetitive food. So full flavored, but help our kids understand what flavor is.
Yeah, we need to spice things up.
Yeah.
Junjo, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. This has been great.
Thank you.
So again, thank you to Junjo. Before our next panel, I'm excited to share 2 videos from U.S. Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa and U.S. Congressmember Cindy Axne, who represents Iowa's 3rd District. Remind our panelists that they can come up on stage. Melissa Bierman, Catherine Peters-McCarter, Celeste Christie, and Catherine Oon.
Hi, folks. This is Senator Joni Ernst, the junior senator from the great state of Iowa. Well, I'm sorry I can't be with you all. I am honored to welcome you to the 24th annual Niman Ranch Hog Farmer Appreciation Celebration. It was so great to see so many of you out at the Iowa State Fair this year. Growing up on a hog farm, I know and appreciate how hard you work. Niman Ranch does a great job of supporting small and mid-sized farmers in rural communities across Iowa. Now, folks, as you know, because of extreme weather and supply chain shortages and inflation, our farmers and ranchers are getting disproportionately slammed. But it's these unique challenges that make organizations like yours more important than ever. Thank you for all the work you do. Enjoy the rest of the weekend, and God bless.
Hi everyone, it's Congresswoman Axne, and welcome to Iowa's 3rd District. It's great to have you all in beautiful downtown Des Moines for the 24th annual Niman Ranch Hog Farmer Appreciation Celebration. I wanted to take a few moments to thank each of you for the work you do to raise animals humanely and sustainably. Some of you may know I'm committed to making sure that animals are treated with the dignity and respect they deserve, and I appreciate your partnership in this effort. I also want to thank you for your commitment to our soil health and clean waterways, which is a leading model in the industry. And while Niman might be a small portion of the industry, it has an outsized impact, which has been showcased in your recent Economic Impact Report. Small and mid-sized independent family farms are economic drivers for our region, for our state, and for our country. And it's absolutely critical we do everything we can to make sure these folks have the resources they need to thrive. I look forward to continuing to work together to transform the industry and create a more sustainable future. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your celebration.
Let's thank those Iowa representatives for sharing their thoughts. But now I am so excited for this next panel to discuss young farmers and the Farm Bill. So let me introduce our panelists. We have Melissa Bierman, the County Director of Adult and Youth Programs at Iowa State University. We're joined by Catherine Peters-McCarter, the Director of Procurement with Chipotle Mexican Grill. We have Celeste Christie, who is an organizer with the Heal Food Alliance. And we have Catherine Oon, the Organizing and Advocacy Director of the National Young Farmers Coalition. Let's give them a round of applause. So we have a lot to cover in a short time. So Catherine Oon, I'd like to start with you because the National Young Farmers Coalition recently released the findings of its latest survey, which is really, really exciting in and of itself. This national survey of young farmers. Can you talk about some of the obstacles that you found, the biggest challenges that young farmers are facing right now?
Sure. The National Young Farmers Survey is the biggest survey of its kind. We surveyed 10,000 young and BIPOC farmers across the country and asked them about the biggest challenges and opportunities for the next generation in farming. The biggest challenge that young farmers face again and again is access to land, and access to land that's accessible but also affordable. And so for our survey, 59% of young and BIPOC farmers said that access to land was very or extremely challenging for them. With access to land comes access to housing. The vast majority of farmers who rent land don't have housing on their farms, so they're commuting long distances to be able to fulfill their farming dreams. Then we have access to capital, like for the hog farming that y'all do, the hoop houses, getting started. Access to capital for young farmers is really difficult. And finally, we have access to USDA programs. About half of our farmers that filled out our survey said that they hadn't used USDA programs this year yet, or hadn't ever heard of them.
Those are huge challenges, and they have a lot to face. What I find interesting about what the work you all do and why it's so important is that you're reaching farmers that the USDA is not. And that saddens and angers me because the USDA should be doing its job. It shouldn't fall on nonprofits like the National Young Farmers Coalition to do that, but you are doing it in such a way that really incorporates those diverse perspectives, which is so important. I'm wondering if you can talk about that.
Sure. The national survey effort to reach 10,000 young and BIPOC farmers, that wasn't just the National Young Farmers Coalition. We partnered with 100 organizations across the country. We made sure that our outreach with phone bankers and text banking was translated and interpreted into Spanish. So it was really a global effort. There was many companies like Niman Ranch and others like Carhartt, like Chipotle, who supported our effort and gave us some really neat raffle items. We were able to raffle off a tractor. So it was really a global effort to get these 10,000 folks, and we're hoping to be able to showcase and model for USDA how to reach the next generation in farming.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate all of that. So, Celeste, if I could turn to you. So the Heal Food Alliance is advocating, like the National Young Farmers Coalition, for transforming our food systems and our food and farming systems. And I wondered what this means for young farmers. How can you help them challenge these big challenges that they're, how can you help them change the way things are right now because they're facing so many obstacles from big ag?
Yes, thank you. One of the things that I really wanted to highlight from Heal Food Alliance, we are a multi-sectoral, multiracial alliance that's really challenging to build collaborative power across the food and farming systems to not only reform, but truly transform the systems that we are participating in and eating in and truly farming in. And so the alliance brings together many different folks across multi-sectorals, so health, environment, labor, and farming. And one of the things that we do in HEAL is we have an amazing program called our SOPL program, or a School of Political Leadership, where we, in a sense, have multiple cohorts that are primarily BIPOC individuals that are farming or food policy, individuals that want to create campaigns or movements or initiatives, particularly for their community, where they can come together to really build collective power as a cohort or as a group. And develop initiatives or campaigns that are tied to their local or state, regional policies to really create a transformative food and farm system that they want to establish in their own communities. Many a times many beginning farmers are always searching for resources or others who are doing things like them and really challenging, how can I do this in my community? How can I do this with other people? Because I know I'm not the only one.
Right.
And to really build collective power together. And so what HEAL does is be able to bring everyone in the room to create resources together, to share stories, and to find power in telling our stories, to create change that we want to see in our communities, and help connect them with folks like National Young Farmers Coalition, other organizers, local and state officials, and really help folks to cultivate their stories, to create the changes that they want to see within their communities, and really challenge the food and farming systems that we are seeing.
It's so exciting because we just heard Junjo talk about like the power of young people to build that collective power through so many different means. So can you talk a little bit about how that works with HEAL, and that you're using technology, you're using grassroots organizing, you're doing all of these different things?
Yes, so what we're doing is to really connect across multi-sectoral. So we are connecting with many different organizations that organize laborers or farm workers, especially to get that perspective, because when we're talking about food and farming, a lot of folks don't remember about the laborers or the folks that are working on the land, the farm workers, the folks that are in processing plants, the people who are really at the root of our food and farming system, because we can't have the food on our tables without those who are harvesting the crops, those that are in the processing plants that are enabling and utilizing their whole entire bodies to really process the food that we eat. And so one of the things that we do, just as I think as Adrienne was saying earlier, like really bringing everyone to the room, bringing all the people who are involved in food and farming systems together, you know, from the labor perspective, from the health perspective, from the policy perspective, to even farmers, in a room where they're not always all talking to each other, and all from urban or rural, or even folks who are actual like fisheries, even on the coasts. To bring all those people into a room to talk, to communicate, and to say, hey, we're all actually facing the same issues. How can we collectively build power together, build a collective voice? So when we're going to the Hill or talking to congressmen or legislators, we're all bringing one collective voice and not saying, oh, it's just, you know, this one community who's impacted, or, oh, it's just this urban or rural community that's impacted. It's truly all of us together. Advocating for the things that we want, because we truly all want the same things. We all want healthy food. We all want people to have rights and to be dignified in the food and farming system. And so how can we do that together is to build collective power and really challenge you know, the corporate powers that be, to really think about, you know, how can we put the power in the hands of people, in the hands of farmers, and really enable those stories to come to the forefront.
It's interesting because you talked about, you know, sort of going against, you know, corporate power here, but we also really need to, you know, what we've heard is we need to include the private sector. Without them, that we can't make change. So Catherine Peters McCarter and Melissa, what role does the private sector play in encouraging more young people to build that collective power that we've talked about, to build diversity that we've talked about, and also to, you know, want careers that are in food and agriculture because they are good careers, that they provide, you know, not just, you know, an income, but that intellectual capital and stability that we all need to really thrive. So I don't know if you want to go first.
Really, the private sector can just support those youth. In my role working with 4-H youth and young kids living in rural Iowa who really don't have access to farming. That might sound unusual to a lot of the folks in the audience, because folks relate to rural Iowa as farming and agriculture. However, in our small county of 8,000 folks, a majority of the kids do not have access to agriculture.
Sure.
They're disconnected from the farm, and that might be just by 1 or 2 generations. So not only can the corporate sector, the private sector, support those youth by providing opportunities for hands-on learning, but that's what we really specialize in, is giving kids
I mean, it is really the convergence of agriculture and technology that makes farming what it is. And I think that there might be a misunderstanding. There's this old-fashioned idea of what it is that just isn't accurate in today's environment. So I think what we can do in terms of Chipotle, in addition to the scholarships that we provide, the partnerships with Catherine's organization and others of that kind, is to help bring awareness of how important farming is. We've done it through commercials. We have Roundup in our apps that customers can kind of round up and give back. But we're also looking for that silver bullet, if you will, and what else can we do? And we're constantly looking for and active in finding those partners that are impactful and effective. And that's why it's so important for these organizations that these young ladies represent, because they're the ones that are boots on the ground, helping to bring not just ideas and policies to life, but actually bringing those farmers in. And that's the connection. It's not just policy, it's not just ideas, it's the execution. It's the execution of those ideas that is really impactful.
Absolutely, and I want to come back to your technology point, and maybe in a few minutes. But Catherine Oon, Catherine Peters McCarter mentioned, the role of policy, but we are in a kind of a tragic environment right now. The nation is very divided, and I'm wondering how we can encourage the policymakers, and you'll hear from policymakers throughout the day today via video, to see that the issues that we're discussing are not partisan, that they are nonpartisan, that they transcend this, because we all have to eat, and we all need farmers to be able to do that, and we need young people to be part of this.
Yeah, I think I'll start by saying that I think the next generation in farming is already here. We hear a lot about this idea that we need to pull new people into our sector. I'm a farmer myself, a young farmer. Melissa works with young farmers who hopefully will come into our sector. And the issue isn't, to me or to National Young Farmers at least, interest in farming. Farming's always had this pull. I think it lives in a lot of people's bloods. It's access, right? Access to land, access to capital, support with healthcare, support with getting started, but it's not really the passion that's missing in the next generation in farming. And access, when we're talking about an issue of like half of the farmland in the US changing hands over the next 20 years, access isn't really something that we can solve on our own, right? It's something that policymakers have to get engaged and that we have to solve on a pretty massive scale. We have a big opportunity coming up with the 2023 Farm Bill. That's $400 billion that the government decides what to do with and where to give it in the ag sector, including the food and nutrition sectors. So I think people are going to be, and the elected officials are going to be looking at ag. They have to, because they have to pass the 2023 Farm Bill. I think ag tends to not be a politicized or partisan issue. There's much more partisan issues right now. So really what's left to do is for all of us to tell our stories, our voices, especially y'all who farm. It's to tell what you see every day and to tell your elected officials why there aren't more farmers in your community and what you hope to see for the next generation in farming.
That's great. And Celeste, that brings me to my next question. So, some elected officials and a lot of the private sector are calling for all of these very lofty goals, but they're calling for them by 2050. And from my perspective, the world will be on fire by then. The world's already on fire, right? And so, I worry that we're doing things too late. How would you like to see policymakers and companies advocate for action now, action maybe before the Farm Bill? We need action now.
Correct. Yeah, I think that first and foremost is putting people first and realizing that policies aren't just numbers and metrics. They're truly each and every one of you all in this room, every farmer that is trying to do the right thing for their land, for the food that they're trying to grow and raise and truly nourish their own bodies and their families and their communities. And that corporations have a corporate control and a larger voice in the room, and they're not necessarily sometimes bodying that or bringing people to the forefront. So how can we really advocate for policies that are humanistic, dignifying to all people within the food and farming sectors, including farmers, laborers, farm workers, those on the ground, and like really bringing those stories to the forefront and really realizing that our policies impact people, impact the land, impact climate. and that for legislators to really connect with individual stories and realize that policies go further than just the metrics and the numbers, and that for really thinking about how to break that down for individuals on the ground, for corporate control to realize that not only can we really bring farmers and individuals to the forefront, but bringing legislators and policymakers, really to the table. And one of the things that I know for HEAL, what we're wanting to do is to create listening sessions localized with, state and local legislators, along with federal, to bring everyone again to the room to really connect and share stories together.
Yeah, that storytelling aspect is so important as part of this. And so, Melissa, you're working with really young people, and you're creating an environment where they can be part of this story, where they understand the connections to the story. How does that work? Because we're talking about lots of different things here, but they need to know all aspects of farming, including the policy, including the advocacy that needs to have, including how the private sector needs to be involved. Those are hard lessons to teach.
Yeah, I agree, especially when you're working with fourth graders, for example.
Sure.
Even the high school youth that we work with, again, they're disconnected. They haven't had that opportunity to be connected to the food system as a whole. And starting from the ground up, I love boots on the ground. That's exactly what has to be done. And that goes to helping those disadvantaged youth,
sure,
as far as providing free opportunities for them to participate in this, in agriculture. They're not able to go out and purchase a few hogs to raise at mom and dad's backyard. That's not attainable for a lot of these families anymore. So providing that opportunity takes funding.
Sure.
Providing that opportunity takes time. It takes a lot of legwork. Just even transportation, right down to the T-shirt that they need to wear in the show ring at the fair. So supporting those kind of initiatives from everybody in the room really makes a difference when you have folks passionate to go out and do the work to reach those kids.
Absolutely, absolutely. I want to turn back to two things that were said earlier. One about dignity that Celeste mentioned, and Catherine, it came up for you too, Catherine Noon. And then Catherine Peters McCarter talking about, when we last spoke, we talked about technology and innovation and the opportunity there to address the climate crisis and other problems in agriculture. But I think there is sort of some tension between both providing dignity for farmers and farm workers and technology, and what you're sort of proposing, Catherine Peters McCarter. So I don't know if I'm asking this question the way I exactly want to, but I think there is some tension there around the dignity and the use of technology. Celeste, do you have thoughts first?
Yeah, I think we have to be really mindful of how we utilize technology, and that it doesn't replace people, and that essentially, I think it's really interesting how earlier with the keynote that there's this blend or merger of technology and human technology and human knowledge, but realizing that we want to utilize technology to our own advantage, and how we can further our own impacts and reach, and how it can really truly utilize that to our own advancement and impacts on the land and climate, but to realize that technology shouldn't necessarily replace the individualistic or the humanistic aspect that we bring to cultivating food and raising food, because when we get so down to mechanization, we lose this distance
Sure.
of what we're just talking about connecting, storytelling, and truly nourishing ourselves and our communities. And so just being mindful that technology can be our friend and can advance us, but that we shouldn't have this be mindful of this gap that could happen in this distillation between technology and humans and our stories, and how that really food is truly the center of our existence, and that how we can be mindful of how technology plays in that relationship with humans and food.
Yeah, so when I speak about technology, I'm not so much speaking about disconnect, but actually quite the opposite, more connection. I think that there's a lot more information, and perhaps technology and information in a sense are a little bit interchangeable in this environment. And what I mean by that is there's so much more we know about certain types of agriculture and farming practices and how they impact soils and water and just life cycles in general. So that's the technology that I'm referring to. It's how do we use that more and more scale. Years ago, and even still to this day, it's very expensive to do like exhaustive and meaningful soil testing. How do we do that in a way that we can do it more often?
Sure.
And at a cost that's more reasonable so that we can better understand. And it was talked about earlier today, farmers need to try new things. What are we doing? What aren't we doing? Or what are we doing that we can do better? And without having some kind of a faster feedback system, through information, how do we know when we're doing the right thing? How do we know when to double down on certain types of techniques? And so to me, it's more of an opportunity to connect, and certainly not to replace or cause disconnection. I think that's the real opportunity.
Absolutely, absolutely. Catherine, I wonder, we've talked about the survey, it came out, it was really exciting. What makes you most hopeful about it from what you heard from all of these farmers?
The survey tells an undeniable story, and we have it as a report now. It's not just the numbers, we tell farmer stories in there, farmers in our network, and how these numbers translate on their own farms for their own stories. So what I'm most hopeful about is this next farm bill. National Young Farmers is asking the government for a $2.5 billion investment in land access in this next farm bill. That's nothing, right? It was a $400 billion piece of legislation. $2.5 billion is nothing. And so it's a very achievable goal and a very achievable campaign. But $2.5 billion, we believe, translates into 1 million acres of farmland that's conserved for farmers, for agriculture, and that can give the next generation in farming access to farmland. So that's what makes me most hopeful. And then being in a room like this with folks who believe that we do need a next generation in farming, that the next generation in farming can farm sustainably, can farm for the welfare of animals, that gives me a lot of hope. And hopefully you all will support the campaign. There's something really quick you can do right now if you believe that you want to support land access for the next generation. You can take out your phones and text Farm Bill.
Take out your phones.
to 40649. And we won't be sending many texts. We'll only send texts during the most key parts of the Farm Bill campaigning. And then you get a text, you get a link, you click on the link, and you send your elected official, especially here in the Midwest. Your elected officials have an outsized importance in Farm Bill negotiations. And you press on the link, and you send your elected official an email. And it sounds like not much, but if everyone in this room does it on the same day, I can promise you that it makes a huge impact, and it's only taken a second out of your day while you're feeding your pigs, cooking something beautiful for someone. It takes a second, and you know that you're supporting a great campaign for the next generation in farming.
Thank you so much. I love a good action item. So my final question for you all, and you each have 30 seconds to answer this, is if Secretary Vilsack, who we'll hear from later via video, were in this room today, what would you say to him? What do you want to happen in the next Farm Bill over the next 2 years of this administration? Melissa.
Okay, and again, I'll speak from the youth perspective. These and the youth that we are seeking out that are non-traditional farm families and the ones that we're really trying to grow into this industry is number one, to provide them that access and provide them the opportunity, yes, to purchase land affordably. And we're fortunate to partner in our 4-H club with Niman Ranch, because these kids do see that they have the opportunity. They don't have to have a giant startup cost. They can own just a few acres of land to get started. And I think really that is the goal, is to educate everybody that they can start small. And I love the conversations earlier about diverse opportunities.
Sure.
Agritourism is not accessed enough, and at least in my portion of the state, Northwest Iowa, there needs to be a lot more economic development focus.
Absolutely.
And
your 30 seconds is up.
Well, thank you. Yes, thank you.
Catherine, what does Chipotle want the Secretary of Agriculture to do?
We would like the Secretary to listen very carefully and give time to platforms like the National Farmers Coalition, that access to land is the foundation, it is the minimum, and they need to do that and then ask, what else can we do to support farmers?
Thank you. Solis.
Yes, we would ask Secretary Vilsack to not just listen and lean towards reform, but to truly transform the Farm Bill, and has an opportunity to do so now, that elevates and highlights Brown and Bracken Indigenous farmers, that highlights climate justice, and truly elevates dignity for farm workers and food workers as well.
Woo! Catherine.
And I would ask our secretary, yes, to support land access in the next Farm Bill, but then to fight for it and fight for all the programs that make our farming and our kind of farming possible for the years to come.
Amazing. This was a wonderful panel. Let's give them a round of applause, please. Thank you all so much. I'm really excited to share this next video that U.S. Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa has kindly shared with us for today's event. Again, Chuck Grassley. We're going to hear from him. While the next video plays, I'd like to welcome New York Times journalist Kim Severson to the stage, and thanks again to our panelists.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chuck Grassley, and I hope some of you already know that. I'm a farmer from Butler County, Iowa, and proud of it. Thank you for this opportunity to address the Neiman Ranch Hog Farmer Appreciation Celebration. It is important that at these celebrations, we recognize the importance that family farmers have on the welfare of our country. While farmers are only 2% of the nation's population, they obviously provide for the other 98%, the food that 98% needs, especially during pandemic. Americans saw shortages at the grocery stores and began to realize that food comes from farmers, not grocery stores. As one of only 2 farmers in the United States Senate, I feel like it is my job to speak out in support of family farms. Farmers are already doing our part to become more sustainable. While some people say farmers are part of the problem, I always tell people that farmers are part of the solution. Farmers are the first conservationists because we always want to hand the farm down to our children better than how we found it. I appreciate the opportunity to address your group, and I want to thank you all for doing the hard work of providing food for our country, and all of this does not go unnoticed. Please reach out to my office if I can ever be of assistance. And of course, have a fantastic time at your celebration.
Let's give him a round of applause. I want to thank Senator Grassley. He meant Nyman, not Neiman. Okay. So I'm really excited to have Kim Severson with us today. Kim is a national food correspondent for the New York Times. She won the Pulitzer Prize for public service for her contributions to the team that investigated sexual harassment and abuse against women. She's also won 4 James Beard Awards and the Casey Medal for Meritorious Journalism for her work on childhood obesity. I personally still can't believe that Kim knows me and responds to my emails. It makes me so happy.
Yeah, I feel the same way about you, and is she doing a great job? Let's just give it up. I just want to say this moderation thing is not easy to do, so.
Thank you. Thank you. So again, so excited to see you. Thank you for being here. So earlier today, we heard from June Jolie, the amazing June Jolie, who talked about Gen Z. And you have thought and really delved into what Gen Z thinks about food. And I'm wondering, anything you disagree with her about? Anything that stood out for you?
Oh God, she's so smart. I hate to say there's things I disagree with because I just, it was great. But I do think that there's, so many segments, socially, economically in the world out there. And, we're a general circulation newspaper sort of, so we're always trying to find kind of what the middle ground is. I think there are a lot of, there's still a segment of that group that is about like food and tech and feels a little bit gimmicky to me, but they're all into chasing what's, I mean, this is the same group that maybe thought Soylent, I don't know if y'all remember when Soylent was that drinkable, like all you could do, you just could sit and work at Google forever and drink your Soylent and never have to have a meal, right? And I don't think it lasted very long because, well, this is a great generation that knows more about cooking and food than we ever did.
Sure.
And they use cooking and food in different ways. I still think there's a segment that, they kind of don't think a lot about where food's coming from, but they see food as a cultural marker,
Yeah.
Kind of like the latest iPhone and the latest, and also, the churn of food trends because of what folks watch on TikTok, Instagram to a degree.
Right.
Instagram's kind of more of a chefy, more high-end sort of food culture that's happening there.
Sure.
And people are also, it's where people advertise their, tamales for sale or a pop-up they're having. So, but TikTok, the trends of food that pop through and people who
Right.
like to use them, I think that's churning really fast, and it's not quite as sort of open and thoughtful and, as it may seem. I think there's just a whole segment of pop culture kids eating, affecting where we're going. So, not that I disagree with her, but I think there's a whole nother segment that, these kids who are making, nachos on their kitchen counter with no pans or whatever they're doing. So
it's gross.
Anyway, I mean, I don't know. It's very interesting.
One thing that worries me with what you're talking about right now is food as a status symbol and further dividing rather than bringing us together. Because we've talked a lot about connection, but when we look at what's happening on TikTok or Instagram, I feel like it's dividing us in a lot of ways.
Well, I'm going to contradict myself, but, it's fake news, so just ignore everything I'm saying. But, I think that there's actually a bringing together around food now and a respect for other food cultures that's really new. I mean, food has always been status, right? And those of us who back in the day discovered how delicious, like the Niman Ranch, Bill Niman's beef was, and the food from... And we, it was a relief to eat that food that was delicious,
Sure.
right? It was like, oh my God, this is what I've been looking for. This is what I want. And then, and the fact that their names were on the menu was kind of cool. And then I felt better about it, and I was eating it and then eventually putting the name of where food came from, went through the Great American Cultural Sluice Box. And so a restaurant identified itself as farm to table, even though, it wasn't necessarily, and they would put a name on a menu and just sort of diluted, but you could identify who you were by going to a farm to table restaurant, and now it's a certain signifier. So food's always been a signifier. One thing I think is happening in terms of bringing people together, our era, my era at least, there was, fusion cuisine, you might think about was a big thing, right? And that was really kind of an erasing of particularly Asian cultures. So fusion was, it was kind of started by like Wolfgang Puck in California, and he would have sort of Asian-y flavors connected with his California cuisine, and it was just sort of a bland, just sort of a blind thing. Like, I guess it's sort of like the Oriental chicken salad became like, so it was called fusion, like this was a good coming together thing. It's the way we used to talk about America as the melting pot. So, and what that really is an absorption of culture and a taking over, it's still a kind of a dominant white culture absorbing other cultures. And I think the kids today really have respect for immigrants in this country, but also that they're of immigrant, so you see cookbooks like called Indian-ish. So these are by young cooks whose parents might have been first generation or even maybe second, but grew up eating, food, Indian food. They're not that kind of Indian food can be very complex to do well, it's a lot of spices. But so they're doing a cookbook called Indian-ish. There's another food writer with us has a new book out called Korean American, and he's there's a certain kind of food that reflects his being in America, but also Korean background. So there's this kind of new, I think, respect for the individualism of different food cultures that isn't making an amalgam of it. So it's separate, but I think it is bringing people together in that way. And there's just a huge, interest in, food from West Africa and what the connection is between West African food and, jambalaya in New Orleans and how that worked. And so I think there's really, I don't think it's dividing people. I think it's much more bringing them together with respect for each individual culture.
Well, it's taking them on a journey. I feel like they're going along this journey that they didn't understand that was even possible before. It's an adventure. It's a journey. It's this cultural and historical sort of education that they're having now that they didn't have before.
Yeah, I do think that piece they were talking about of wanting to eat something where they would be unintentionally harming someone else, a worker at a packing plant, or a farmer, or that I think that idea that they're eating and hurting the planet or hurting another human is a real value. I think there's what's real in practice versus what they feel are different, because I think it's once you start to actually talk to somebody about how the food system works, some of that idealism falls apart very quickly. But that's why I think, something like a Niman Ranch product, you can see like you do need to have bacon at your house for your whatever. So how are you going to get that there if you don't have access to Alan Benton's great bacon out in Kentucky or, whatever.
Right.
So, I don't know.
Well, and I think that leads me to my next question, which is, the pandemic affected the way consumers shop in so many ways. And so there was this big rise in people buying plant-based meat because because of the closures of processing plants or the sicknesses of processing plants. There was this big explosion of people buying plant-based meat. And I wonder what you're seeing now as we're 2.5, almost 3 years into the pandemic, how that's changed and how people are looking at, Niman products, looking at other sustainable meat products.
Well, plant-based is really interesting. You're going to start to see a lot of attempts at chains that are like plant-based burger chains that are really, really a lot of these burgers, they don't taste much different than like a Whopper,
Sure.
And they're not necessarily that much healthier for you. It's a signifier, people feel like livestock and agriculture is contributing to climate change. I always think there's no way we're going to eat our way out of this.
No.
We could stop driving, that might help. But when people are like, oh, I can't, I love. Well, first of all, the plant-based thing, I think you're going to see that really. It's already starting to level off the growth and interest in that. Partially because people have started to read the food labels, right? So if you ever read the label of a plant-based product, it really does not look like a very healthful product.
Yeah.
So people are trying to now redevelop their plant-based burgers to be, more from plants.
Yeah.
And then there's also this feeling like this. I think we're in a transitional period where eating less meat is not about eating fake meat.
Right.
It's just about
it's about beans.
Less meat. Like eating other things and using meat as a either seasoning or complementary, not that sort of center of the plate protein. So I think the young people especially, are starting to realize they want purity of ingredients in ways that, and it's also incredibly water energy intensive to make plant-based meat. And I think if people really understood, people who are concerned about the environment, want to stop climate change, so they're eating a plant-based burger, if they sort of looked at the processing that takes place to make those. So anyway, I think that's going away. How's it changed how people shop? Was that the pandemic?
Yeah.
I think this is a generation that understands now that you can't just have, what you want when you want it. And that I think that's going to really change how people shop and cook. I think the farmers market generation, like my generation, went through where farmers markets became elitist, I remember my mother being like, how much did you pay for that sausage? She was like, she grew up on a dairy farm, and she was like, oh my God, you paid like $18 for a sausage? They used to hang in her basement. And so there was this elitism about food that I think's really collapsed now, right? So people at farmers markets, they go because it's where they can get good food.
Right.
But there's also a real understanding of the workers in ways that maybe our farmers market generation didn't connect as well. And less sort of fussy attention to the specificity of organic. I think people feel like organic's been commandeered a little bit to,
Yeah.
you know, it's a commodity, it's a marketing
Right,
gimmick.
right.
So it's much more about the person who's growing that as opposed to the label. So I don't know, none of this is really answering your question.
No,
but
I love it,
I think
though.
it's a whole new way of shopping and looking at grocery stores and at where they get their food. People really want to have, you know, get their one thing from a small place. I think the mega grocery stores, the Walmart generation for at least, you know, urban and suburban kids is going away a little bit, some of them.
What's interesting to me, and give me a moment because this relates back to something you said, but hey, Emily, could you get me my water?
Meanwhile, while she's trying to, the tabs here are so impressive, the colored, numbered tabs of what we're all going to be doing. I'm
so
in
much.
awe of her organization.
Bravo to Emily Payne from Food Tank. Thank you so much. That helps. Okay. So one of the things that interests me is that now grocery stores are having these sort of plant-based sections, right? These plant-based burger sections, meat sections. But as you said before, these plant-based foods in so many ways are worse for us than you know, just regular meat. And so I feel like my generation has been deceived, like, you know, very sort of intentionally, because we believed that if we ate plant-based, we were saving the world. And so how do we sort of reconcile that with the trends that are happening in grocery stores where they have this whole plant-based meat section and people think they're doing the right thing, as you said before, but they're not?
Right, well, you know, greenwashing has a long and illustrious history in the American grocery store, right? You know, in fact, there's a brand now of, it's like paper products and, you know, foil and stuff and coffee filters, and it's called If You Care. And I'm like, what it like, you don't care. It's like the most shaming title ever, right? Like, if you care. Well, if I don't buy that, I guess I don't care. I'm like a terrible person. So I think it's like kind of gone, you know, the green marketing thing has kind of gone a little crazy. And I think that young people can sniff that out pretty quickly.
Right.
And as far as like the plant-based stuff in grocery stores, it's an evolutionary process, right? So some grocery stores still have the international section, you know, at least they're not calling them the Oriental section anymore, but now you see a number of sauces, like you'll be in the hot sauce area and there are hot sauces from different countries and, you know, soy sauce is right there next to the ketchup. And so you know, things went from a section of the grocery store into just the grocery store. And I think, you know, plant-based stuff will be, but the idea, the name plant-based is such a weird term anyway, which I think will fade. I like, how about just plants instead of like plant-based? Like, is my salad plant-based? Am I eating, like, what does it mean? So again, I think it's a transitional time. The other thing that's interesting that I've noticed is a lot of boomers have stopped eating so much meat. And I think some of it is just age. Like with age, you want to eat less of the heavy meat. And then there's a lot of people feel a little bit more connection to, you know, animals and kind of feel like they understand the mass production of meat does not sound good or feel good to them anymore. So I think we can't discount the number of boomers who are also not eating meat and, you know, or transitioning the kind of meat that they ate. So, you know, I think that diets are changing a lot, and whether plant-based, I don't know. It's a transitional fate. Although you're going to see a lot of it every, you know, the minute they had an Impossible Burger at Starbucks, I'm like, this is it. This is over. Or this is playing out. You know, however it's playing out. But you know, my kid is a high school freshman. For a while, was really, oh my God, I can get the Impossible thing. I thought it was a cool thing, and doesn't really want that kind of stuff anymore. I mean, we eat a lot of variety of things, but I think the novelty of it is
it's worn off. Yeah, for sure. I do want to shift gears a little bit because we heard about food waste earlier today. And in 2020, you know, after years of growing awareness about food loss and food waste, we saw this huge spike in food waste. And for obvious reasons. I mean, I don't think there was a way around it. That has more or less leveled off, that spike. But we're still seeing so much waste in homes, at retailers, on the farm, at groceries, restaurants, et cetera. Do you think perceptions of food waste are changing? Do people still care?
Yeah, I think they do care. Again, this is another area where I think people who are very concerned about climate change on kind of just a consumer level feel like if they buy the ugly vegetables at the grocery store, they're going to save the planet. And again, I'm like, we're not going to eat our way out of climate change, right? But I do think there's an ethos and a value, and because this generation knows how to cook really well, they want to run a more efficient kitchen. So the idea of taking your peelings and composting them, or putting something into a stock pot, or making something in freezing parts, you know, is it's much more of just a common kind of ethos among younger eaters. They're just into that. And I think food manufacturers, you know, there's people making new kinds of beer and vodka and stuff out of food waste. I think that's really appealing to people, and they'll buy a product that they think the manufacturer has thought through what's happening with the waste. So I think it's gotten more integrated. I don't think it has the, I don't know, there was a period, you're right, it was sort of the breathless bandwagon and food waste, and we've got to stop food waste.
Right.
You know, I just did a
I was
story
part
about
of that.
salvage. I think we had a talk like this. I just did a story about salvage grocery stores. I don't know if you guys ever shop at the Bent and Dent stores, or the, it's kind of that secondary market. And I was interested in it because it's an inflationary story, and people who hadn't really seen the great deals that you could find at the secondary market. But I found this a whole group of people younger people who shop there because of the waste issue, and they're trying to keep food out of the, it's like the fast fashion thing. People understand now that when you send something back to Amazon or wherever, chances are it's going to get burned. It's going to, it's not going to go back in. And so I think that's a big ethos with kids too, with no fast fashion. And big companies like Stella McCartney, for example, which has a big clothing line, has made it just a priority to figure out how to upscale clothes, so you can return some of their fashion and it'll turn it into other things. So I think this idea of not wasting stuff is a big cultural piece of Gen Z in many ways. Have you heard about this like mending thing where you mend and then it's like if you have a hole in your shirt, you mend it, but in a way that's very obvious that you mend it, and you can kind of make it into an art form. So there's this whole reusing your clothes,
very cool,
and then making a statement with how you anyway.
No, it's
the
great.
Kids. Who knew? I'm going to bring them my jeans. They can sew them up for me.
So, we've talked about the climate crisis in different ways, and the things that worry me are that, companies are starting to use carbon labeling as sort of this marketing tool. Companies like Oatly and others are trying to do it the right way and being very intentional about it, but others I'm really concerned about. And again, I don't want to feel deceived as a consumer, as an eater, as somebody who cares about what she buys at the grocery store or the farmer's market. I want to feel good about it, but I don't want to be greenwashed about it. And I think, a term that's come up for me lately is green wishing. These companies wish they could do these things, so they're saying they can do them.
I like that.
They're saying they can do them, but I'm not sure with a lot of the carbon or climate, smart labeling on foods that they can do that. So are we going to be sort of boondoggled again?
We're always going to be boondoggled with food marketing, my friend. It's the nature of food marketing, right? But I think this carbon, we're going to be carbon neutral by 2020, whatever, and Coke's intention to be carbon, I think, again, we're going to be, it's the new sustainable, right? And people talked about regenerative being the new sustainable, but I don't know. I don't think I even understand, and I think the people who have businesses that are about carbon credits understand it because it's big business for them. But I don't think it's real impact on how the earth is changing or what we're doing to stop climate change. I just don't. I don't know enough about that, but I do know that it is becoming, in the way, regenerative, which is a word that sort of means nothing. I mean, we know what it means in terms of if you run a farm, you know what it means.
Sure.
So carbon neutral, carbon neutrality, regenerative, these are phrases I think will be used by food companies and already being, I don't really know what it means. If I'm going to buy something that says it's carbon neutral, I don't know.
Sure. Yeah, it makes me wonder.
If you care, you'll buy it, but I don't know.
I'm going to crawl into a hole.
Yeah.
So, if companies keep co-opting the language that, activists in this room have worked so hard for decades to get into the vernacular, What does that mean for sort of the future of buying food? Because we're all so confused all the time, and we don't need another label, do we? Do we need, what kind of information do consumers really need?
I think ultimately it does end up being, making a good, sustainable cultural change. I mean, look at the Niman Ranch brand, right? So that was a guy who was like, okay, I want to sell meat that tastes better because it's not raised in this thing, and it became a bit elitist, and the phraseology and what does it mean to get an animal that is, treated like where a pig is allowed to be a pig, like that was, and now that's a popular culture thing, and I can buy Niman Ranch bacon at my local store and feel good about it, and it's my house bacon, by the way. Thank you all very much. Because I kind of understand the company and where it came from. So I think these things start like this, and they kind of get mushed around in culture, but they do move things forward. I think products that aren't as water, or products that don't have a bad labor record. I think that starts to matter, and it may sound like the food industry is co-opting phraseology, but I think or you could argue that organic was one of those things that kind of went off the rails, but it did take a lot of pesticide load out of so it is a little like I'm sure there's all the organic labels and the organic certification companies that I think it's like incredibly scammy, a lot of them, but nonetheless I like to buy an organic product, and it's very easy for me to get them, and it's taken pesticides out. So there's something good about the when something moves into popular culture and a phrase gets sort of co-opted. Because I think it ultimately does change culture overall.
Absolutely. Talking about changing culture, chefs have been such a big part of changing how we think about food. I mean, we have all these food programs on TV, and whether it's Tom Colicchio or Rachel Ray. And, those are some of the folks, especially Tom, created so much awareness around food waste. What kind of messaging do you want to see from chefs now about where the food system sort of needs to go in terms of moving things forward, of talking about climate in a real way, of talking about, overconsumption or over-consumerism in a real way?
Yeah, I mean, I think chefs have been asked to do a whole drive in lots of lanes they shouldn't have been asked to drive in because, they're cooks, right? Like, I don't want to discuss, I don't understand, carbon offset, whatever, I'm a cook, right? But they've been asked to do a whole bunch and lead in a lot of ways. And, they have been, Tom Colicchio right now is investing tons in vertical gardens, right? Indoor vertical gardens. And so this is just a side note, but there are young people in cities who call themselves farmers, and they're going to work in vertical farms, and it's all indoors with lights, and you're not really. I'm just kind of so curious about that term. Like, do they feel like I thought farmers had a draw to the land and what
soil,
things produce, soil, right? But here they are, and farmers. And anyway, that's a whole interesting other sidetrack.
That's our next summit.
But I think the thing that chefs are doing now, and that where kitchens are leading, particularly in the pandemic, and I think the way restaurants were running were really not sustainable. This idea that you ran 6 days a week, and you had to fill all the meal things, and you had to stay. I mean, there's just no way that a restaurant can have a good quality of life for the owner and the people, and give people food whenever they want it all the time. It's another thing we've learned, right? We can't get everything at the grocery store, and we can't expect every restaurant to be open all the time when we want it. So I think they're leading the way on labor and treating people like humans, and realizing that happy people make better tasting food. That show, The Bear, I don't know if y'all watched that show, was great. But a lot of that was like about changing how we treat people who make our food, right? And that, I think, fits in with what's happening, the growing awareness of how, laborers in meatpacking plants are treated, farm labor. So I think where chefs are leading now is like trying to just treat people better. And I think it's a generation that wants the people who are making their food to not be exploited.
Right.
So it's kind of that seems like the cultural moment for chefs and kitchens right now. It's not necessarily food-based exactly, but I think if you're not exploiting somebody, the food tastes better, right?
Absolutely. I mean, if you treat the animals taste. If you treat the animals better, they taste better. And I'm sorry to keep mentioning Tom Colicchio, but he and I have talked a lot about this, how restaurants are changing, and how folks like him of his generation were sort of part of the problem, and how they've seen how restaurants cause not only things like sexual harassment and the workers being underpaid, but also severe mental illness and depression, and that there needs to be a change and a shift in restaurants, and from your perspective as somebody who studies food trends and food business, what does this restaurant of the future look like? Because I've been waiting for it.
It's a really interesting time. In fact, I'm working on a story right now, trying to understand what is hospitality going to be in the future, and as American hospitality changed. If you think about the old days, where even we had the diner waitress was kind of an icon, right? And there's that old show, you could be, if this dream that you could slip the maitre d' $100 and be king of the world for a night because they'd show you a good table, and that, that idea of good American hospitality, right? And now we're in an era where service industry is just, we're in an era in which it somehow was okay to slap a flight attendant. When was it? How was, I just feel like American, our exchange has been breaking down, right?
Yeah.
And now is it going to be all QR codes where we're going to touch menus anymore?
Sure.
So I think the restaurant and hospitality is really, is really in a flux.
Yeah.
And again, there's so many levels, right? There's fast food, and I know that that's real economic. My kid does not like McDonald's, although I've tried to teach them the beauty of a McDonald's French fry. I'm working on it. Which I always order without salt, so then I know they're going to cook them fresher, and they have to cook them fresh if I order them without salt.
Smart.
Put my own salt on them. Pro tip: so you can get a hot McDonald's French fry. There's nothing worse than a cold McDonald's French fry. So this is going off the rails, isn't it? I'm sorry.
I love it. Love it.
Anyway, I don't know the restaurant of the future. I do know that a lot of restaurants that I like to go to now are open only Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Yeah.
2 or 3 days a week. I live in Atlanta, and I know in New York and in San Francisco there are restaurants that really are not. They're picking 3 days where they're not open, and that's the prep. So I think you're going to see a lot of that. Super interesting. I think you're going to see a lot fewer items on menus. This idea of, the cheesecake factoryization of how we eat is, God bless that, and it'll stay there forever. But, I don't think every restaurant's going to feel like it has to be everything to every person,
Sure.
So they're not going to have vegan-only dishes,
Right.
but there are going to be a lot of vegetable-based dishes. They're not going to say these are our vegan.
Sure.
A lot of people are not doing vegetarian dishes because it's hard to have something maybe with cheese and no meat, and then with no dairy. They're just vegetable-based food.
Sure.
Other parts of the menu. So
Sure.
I think a collapsing, maybe a purification of restaurants, a nicer place.
Yeah, for everyone,
Yeah.
not just us as eaters. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So maybe my final question in the 2 minutes we have left is, you talked about hospitality changing, but hospitality can only change if there are people willing to work in it. And this great resignation that we're seeing and this lack of workers who are willing to be in hospitality is really having a strain on restaurants, on retail, food retail, and all of us as consumers, because you're right, we can't go to restaurants the way we used to and get the sort of service we expect. We're expected to be more empathetic and patient, but in an era where we're slapping flight attendants, how do we sort of reconcile all these things?
That's a giant question. One interesting note about people, and I'm not sure the labor shortage is exactly a great resignation. Nobody wants. Definitely hospitality has a problem with hiring people, but part of it is attracting the right people. And I was at a hospitality little think tank seminar with Danny Meyer, who's, has actually started Shake Shack, but is a big restaurateur and kind of Mr. Hospitality. And one thing that I learned there is that it's not that people don't want to work in restaurants or hospitality, but they are very willing to leave the second it isn't cool to work there.
Mm-hmm.
So if, for example, there's any hint that people of color haven't been treated right, or there is some hint of some kind of sexual harassment, or the brand itself starts to get a little
Sure.
bit, I think the average number of jobs a kid by 27 had was like 6 or 7 jobs. You know, we were like, build your resume, don't leave before a year is over, you won't look good. But kids are very, I mean, the young workers who are coming into hospitality, very sensitive. It's not fun to work there. They'll work for a little less money if it's a cool place to work and they believe in the cause and they have camaraderie with a cool crew. All those things matter more than money right now. And then we'll leave in a second if the brand gets tainted or if it doesn't feel cool or somebody's feeling exploited or they're not supported at their workplace. So that, I think, is going to change a lot of the restaurant world, you know, because it really is about personal and you know, folks are willing to walk away in ways they weren't before.
Yeah, it is all about that
so
personal
make sure your
connection.
brand is good and be nice to people and don't exploit people and don't be a racist, sexist idiot. And then you'll have a successful business.
Great points to end on. Thank you, Kim Severson. I always learn so much from you. Thank you for being here. And I get to talk to her again at dinner. So thank you
Thanks,
so
everyone.
much. Thank you. Please. Move to the panel, move my water. I won't choke again, I promise. I am now excited to turn to our next panel, moderated by Ty Rushing, who is an Iowa journalist. He serves as a senior editor of the Iowa Starting Line, a member of the Courier News Network. He will be joined by Chris Oliviero, Julia Johnson, and Ev Koke. The stage is yours. Oops, no, it's not. I messed up. Before they come on stage, and this is very important, so this choking sort of upset me, so I'm off my game. I'm getting back. Okay, we'll be playing 3 short videos from U.S. Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack, U.S. Congressmember Mariannette Miller Meeks of Iowa's 2nd District, and Danny Meyer, restaurateur who you just heard about, and founder of the Union Square Hospitality Group. So now I will leave the stage. Thanks, everyone, for your patience.
Thank you to Niman Ranch for inviting me to your Ranch Hog Farmer Appreciation Celebration. I've long enjoyed coming to this event, and I'm proud that Niman Ranch started in my home state of Iowa. For the past 24 years, this event has gathered independent family farm partners, customers, and thought leaders to celebrate the dedication of the Niman Ranch Farmer Network. As Secretary of Agriculture, I know the importance of small farms when it comes to providing the food, fuel, and fiber of this country. It's why USDA has channeled so much of our efforts into helping rural Americans like you thrive. We've taken great steps in this work, due in no small part to the work of President Biden in passing the American Rescue Plan, which helps us work hard for working people. Earlier this year, we announced our plans to transform the farm systems in this country. In rural America, that means our local and regional food systems need to work for and with small farmers. What we need is a complementary local and regional food system that enables our farmers not only to have a market in commercially sized operations, but also a local market. The ability to sell to local schools, local colleges and universities, to hospitals, institutional purchasers, restaurants, and grocery stores. These are the types of relationships that provide an opportunity for small businesses and entrepreneurship to take root again in rural places. And that brings new competitive markets and more jobs for farmers like all of you. Because of the American Rescue Plan, we're also in the process of making hundreds of grants to existing processing facilities so they can expand their market opportunities beyond just selling inside the state where they're located. In October, we'll be announcing the first round of a series of processing grants where we're going to expand new processing capacity in this country to create more competition, which means better prices for farmers and lower costs for consumers. We know that small farmers are looking for opportunities in the budding organic food supply chain too. That's why USDA recently announced it will make up to $300 million available for our new Organic Transition Initiative to provide comprehensive support for farmers transitioning to organic production, as well as to support current organic producers. We also recognize that fertilizer shortages have put a strain on farm communities. To mitigate future issues with access to fertilizer, we've streamlined our application process for nutrient management and expect participants in the plan to save over $30 an acre next year. These are just some of the steps that USDA has taken to help rural communities and the small farmers like those at Niman Ranch. USDA and Niman Ranch share a goal of helping the next generation of farmers, and on behalf of USDA, please know that we're working to ensure that barriers are removed and robust support is offered to those who carry the mantle forward. America's family farms and ranches are an essential part of today's economy and will continue to be at the heart of solutions as we continue to revitalize our economy. I hope you have a wonderful event and take the time to celebrate all your hard work and the contributions you're making to our great country.
Hello and welcome to the 24th Annual Niman Ranch Hog Farmer Appreciation Celebration. I'm Congresswoman Marionette Miller Meeks, and I'm thrilled so many of you have come together to recognize the tireless efforts of our farmers and learn more about our great state of Iowa. Iowa leads the nation in production of corn, soybeans, pork, and various other crops and livestock, which means there's no better place to hold the celebration. Like most Iowans, I understand the importance of family farms, and I've continuously worked to support them during my time in Congress. I'm proud to see Niman Ranch supporting small and mid-sized farms and families in our rural communities. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of your 24th Annual Hog Farmer Appreciation Celebration. I hope you all enjoy the evening.
Hey everybody, it's Danny Meyer, and I really want to salute the Niman Ranch farmers who we've worked with for many, many years. Thank you for your commitment to raising animals humanely and sustainably. We all know that when the farmers who are as close to the animals as possible are squeezed out by the market at large, it is not a good thing for the animals, it's not a good thing for society, and it's certainly not a good thing for the flavor that we put on the plate for our customers. We are so grateful to each and every one of you, and thank you for your ongoing commitment. We know the work is hard, but this is very, very important, and we're very, very proud to support your work.
Okay. Oh, the mic is on. Perfect. Awesome. I'm going to be looking at my phone, but that's where my questions are because I didn't print it out, so don't think I'm not paying attention. Awesome. So I'm so glad to be joined by this esteemed panel today. And, I want to start us off with a big subject that's been, it's been a talk in Iowa ag circles, Prop 12. So Prop 12, I believe the final rules for which came out on September 1st. And I wanted to get everyone's thoughts on this law. Is it a step in the right direction? Is it going too far, or is it not doing enough? Chris, let's start with you.
Okay. A lot of you have heard me talk about my views on Prop 12, and not surprisingly, I think it's the most significant step forward in animal care, especially in the swine industry, probably in the history of the industry. It's passed with tremendous consumer support, and it's something that is truly beneficial for small farmers. We're fortunate at Niman that Niman was launched by Paul, with standards that go well beyond what Prop 12 stands for. So we're very much in support. We're very disappointed that actually the Supreme Court has decided to listen to the challenge to the case. And we look forward to hopefully getting beyond this and implementing something that the industry's had 4 years to get ready for.
Okay, Julie.
Yeah, and echoing what Chris said, I think it's definitely a right step in improving farm animal welfare. And I think it's really important, too, that the support around this from California residents was overwhelming, and not only for the producers in the state, but influencing our food system overall. I think it's definitely a good step in the right direction, of course with pigs, but then also for chickens and for veal as well.
Okay, Vade.
Yeah, so I think before I answer your question, Ty, just giving some quick context. So I work for ButcherBox. We source humanely raised meat, wild-caught seafood, and ship direct to consumers' doors. And with the support and help of Niman, we wrote an amicus brief in support of Prop 12, so it's very clear kind of where the company stands on the topic. And as we were prepping for the brief, really what came very clear is that the idea that I feel that Prop 12 is a reflection of what consumers are looking for. They're looking for a more humanely raised product, and we've seen that reflected in ButcherBox as a business. We've seen consumers interested in wanting to purchase the product, as well as when we're surveying customers as well, we see that reflected in the survey questions.
Could you talk a little bit more about the survey? Because I know you mentioned that you guys have some data on this that backs this up.
Yeah, definitely. So I do think we'll hear later from Anna Marie, who has done nationwide surveying, so I won't steal her thunder, but a lot of her survey results do reflect what we see in ButcherBox surveys. You know, when we've surveyed in different iterations, you know, what influences consumers' decisions to purchase meat, the two top things that come to mind are wanting a product that's free from antibiotics, and then the second is wanting a humanely raised product. And that's kind of come up again and again in multiple different surveys that we've put out.
Okay, and speaking of which, my next question is, I guess, how do you implement change in a responsible manner that doesn't negatively impact the welfare of animals? Like, what's a way that producers can go about this? And we're going to go back to Chris.
Yeah, so a couple comments. You know, I think the first one, what's great about the fact that the industry is fighting Prop 12 and Question 3 is it's dragged out the debate on Prop 12 and Question 3 and what it actually is. So there's so much more attention today on this issue than there was even when it was passed, and probably more discussion and more debate today than would have happened, you know, had the industry just moved forward and implemented it. And you know, so I think what's really important, right? It's, you know, we need to take the hard steps in the right direction. That's a great first step. I think if you have a position on an issue, you know, for us, we supply lots of customers who have, you know, who may have pork that's not Prop 12 compliant. Our job and my job as the GM for this company is to be willing to put my voice behind and our company's voice behind the issues that matter. And, you know, I think if you're a company and you say you're for humane animal care and you're opposed to gestation crates and you are not publicly standing up for this bill, then, you know, I think you have to question the sincerity of your commitment to this issue.
Okay, Julia.
In my role at Compassion in World Farming, I work with leading food businesses, both in the United States and around the world, on animal welfare. And what we're seeing, as ButcherBox is also revealing, is that consumers care about this and companies want to make a difference, but they don't always know where to start. There's a lot of greenwashing and humane washing in the industry, and as Chris and I were talking about yesterday, if industry is so positive and thinking that gestation crates are humane, then why isn't it all over the products? Why aren't there videos talking more about this? And it's because there's this understanding that a 7-foot by 2-foot crate for pigs is inhumane. It just simply is. And consumers, even if they don't understand how pork is produced overall, we all have dogs and cats at home. We would never want to put an animal in that. We would never want to sit in an airplane seat, as Dr. Temple Grandin talks about as an equivalence for a gestation crate for our entire lives. And that's what these pigs are experiencing. And so when I work with food businesses, they want to make a step in the right direction, but they don't necessarily always know how. So that's what I do as a senior food business manager, is helping them create a policy, but then also developing that roadmap and plan forward to implement. Because a policy is important and it's great, but if you don't actually make change and work with your producers and your suppliers, we're not going to be able to shift the industry.
Okay, Vande.
So one of the things we think a lot about at ButcherBox, and honestly are still trying to figure out the most effective way, is how to communicate with consumers and potential consumers around what humane animal welfare actually means. So the survey results say, yes, we care, but when they go to the grocery store or they look at a product, do they actually know what to look for to know that the product that they're purchasing is in fact raised in a way that they want to purchase? And it's been honestly incredibly difficult, even as a company who, because we're direct to consumer, we're able to speak to our customer more effectively than I think the average retailer. It's still very hard to boil down a complex topic, even something, we experienced, for those who went on the farm tour yesterday, hours of information, education, getting to see things firsthand. How do you boil that down into the 5 seconds you have to speak to the consumer? It's very hard. So it's something that honestly we're still trying to figure out as a company to help consumers understand. But I do think that will make a very large impact.
See, you said you guys were still trying to figure it out, because I was going to follow up like, oh, well, what have you guys done? But you're like, well, we're still working on it, so I'll restrain from that one. All right. Now, Julia, I know this is something close to your heart and strikes directly what your organization does. What are some of the issues with gestation crates, and what do you think should be done about that?
So gestation crates are used by industry solely on efficiency. These animals are not able to turn around. They're not able to walk around. They're not even able to really lay down comfortably. And some of these farms have 10 to 20 to 50,000 sows in one operation, and you're not able to allow them to express natural behaviors. So at Compassion in World Farming, we really believe that eliminating this is the worst practice in pork production that we're seeing. It's not only gestation crates, but farrowing crates as well. We need to allow these animals that are incredibly intelligent and curious to express their natural behaviors. And going one step further, ensure that they're not in a barren environment. So making sure that there's enrichment and bedding for them to lay down comfortably, and root, as we went out yesterday and saw on the farm, in these hoop houses, we can see that these pigs are so active, and they're digging in the hay and the straw and the dirt, and it warms my heart every time when I come to these events, because I know that these farmers truly care about these pigs, and you can give that individual care that is so needed in our food system. So at Compassion in World Farming, we really see the elimination of gestation crates and farrowing crates as absolutely necessary, and then going beyond that to make sure that these pigs have a good quality of life as well.
Okay. Now, Chris, this one is for you. So I read in a previous interview that you see Niman Ranch as a force for change within the industry, and as proof of that, quote, that there is a market out there for higher quality products that preserve the integrity of our land for future generations of farmers and ranchers. Could you provide some examples of this, and do you think the methods are able to be replicated at other businesses?
Sure. So a couple comments again. I view success in terms of what we're doing by making the rest of the industry a little bit uncomfortable. Right? That's our job. We're not big. We're not efficient. We're not high scale. If we try to compete head on with the larger industry, we will fail. Right? So that's kind of first and foremost. And then in order to be successful, our number one job is to create a market for our farmers, for the products that they produce. And if you went on the farm tours yesterday, you got a sense for how hard that can be. And by the way, that was on a nice day. So come back in January and help them break water, break ice so that the pigs have access to water, clear the snow so they can bring the feed out. But it's our job to create that market, and it's only made possible with everybody who's in this room. So I think I hear a lot of talk about Prop 12 as something recently. This is a new argument that it's bad for small farmers. And again, I would come back to, I think you have to question the source of that statement. The hog farming industry, since 1967, there's 92% fewer people raising hogs in this country, right? And the majority of that has happened since 1992. And so when I hear an argument in defense or in opposition to something like Prop 12, coming from the very industry and the very model that has destroyed hog farming nationally in this country, I think you have to call into question the source and the validity of that argument. But again, I think Paul touched on it earlier. What we offer is the ability to step into this business, right? If you want to get into confinement, you need $1 million to put up a confinement barn. I don't know too many young people who have access to $1 million. You have to buy land. Land prices in Iowa were up 25% last year. So just think about trying to get into this business and that kind of capital outlay just to get started. With our system, you can spend $40,000, $45,000 and put up a hoop barn and then make that investment. And assuming it works, then you can say, I'm going to put up another one. And so we offer the opportunity to scale in pieces and in a way that's sustainable and can be part of a diversified farm. And diversifying your farm is like diversifying a stock portfolio or anything that you do. It provides resilience in the face of adversity. And adversity is part of what farmers have to fight through every single day.
Man, you're just like a quote machine. Like, I just want you to know that. Like, I'm like, oh my God, that's so much good stuff. All right, so Avande, now I know ButcherBox operates with a similar mission as Niman Ranch, and last year you guys became a certified B Corporation. Can you tell us more about ButcherBox's mission and what does it mean to be a certified B Corporation, and how did you guys go about earning that designation?
Yeah, definitely. So our mission, very similar to missions we've heard all day today, and Niman's mission is all around what does it look like to push forward a better meat ecosystem. And so we think about it against the following pillars. So what is better for the animal, better for the farmer, worker, planet, and ultimately for our customer. And you know, as Chris was just sharing more about Niman's model, I think what's so awesome and beautiful about it is that, you know, this panel is specifically about animal welfare, but as you think about better animal welfare practices, all the ways in which that results in something that's better for the farmer, something that's better for the land, and as Paul said at the very beginning and all day yesterday, creating a better quality, tastier product for the customer. And so I just love kind of how all of those pieces are interconnected, and I do believe you have to think about that full ecosystem and how all of those different levers affect each other. And sometimes, you know, I just painted a very beautiful picture of how it's all, you know, building on each other very positively. And I do think you run into sometimes where, you know, something that might be better for the animal, maybe it's not better for the farmer, or, you know, vice versa. And so kind of trying to do all of those trade-offs as you make decisions. And then to speak to your question about B Corp certification, so for those who are unfamiliar with B Corp certification, it really is a certification that specifically for-profit companies can apply for, and it measures your social and environmental responsibility. So you have to fill out a questionnaire, hundreds of questions on topics such as, you know, what kind of benefits do you offer your workforce, all the way to are you doing anything to measure your carbon footprint, a whole host of questions. You fill it out, turn it in, and you have to score a minimum of 80 in order to be qualified as a B Corp certified company. And then you have to renew your certification every 3 years. So for ButcherBox, we're up for our recertification this next year in 2023. So we'll have to refill out all of those questions again and continue to score an 80 or above in order to maintain that certification. And what I would say is the work of that certification is really a true reflection of what's going on in the organization. So it's not possible for one department to make sure that we achieve that certification, because it's really looking across operations, human resources, all across the business. And so it really requires the effort of the entire company in order to get enough points to meet that certification.
Dang, that sounds like the ultimate team project, so.
Yes.
Okay, and now, so next question is, what does it mean, and this is for everyone, what does it mean for a for-profit business to care about animal welfare? And so, Chris, let's start with you.
Again, I think it's being very clear on what's important to you, what it means to care for animals, and most brands that erode over time, it's because they make small concessions and small compromises, often to very difficult situations that arise, right? So, you know, they're in a bind. I don't have any bacon, and we only source, you know, our pork from U.S. farmers. And I would say, you know what? I'm gonna use imported pork that meets our standards, and I'm gonna put that under my label. And I do that one time, and then later on, some other challenge arises, and we make another small compromise. And you do that again and again and again. And suddenly, 3, 4, 5 years later, you're looking back and going, how in the hell did I get to this place with this brand? And, all of us in all of our roles here, we're all temporary stewards in these roles, right? It's our job to respect what it took to get to this place that we inherited. And I think a lot of people take that for granted because they're often in these roles for short periods of time. And then being very mindful of what's it going to take to position this business for the people who are going to follow after me, whether it's in my role, a farmer, somebody managing, a large retailer, family-owned food service distributor, whatever it is. So I think that's what it means.
Okay. Julia?
So as a nonprofit, we're in a unique position where we're not for-profit, but in my role, I work with hundreds of food businesses that have a spectrum of reasons on why they care about animal welfare. So some are on board and they believe in the mission and they want to join forces. And other ones might be more resistant, but it's internal or external stakeholders that are pushing them to report when it comes to ESG and corporate social responsibility. We're hearing more just from the earlier talk about Gen Z, how this is such a important issue to them in learning how did their food get to their plate and their table, and we're hearing it more and more. And so when it comes to companies stepping up for animal welfare, it really just depends on how they want to market that and how they want to tell that story. And we're hearing that so much with storytelling. So not only talking to the procurement teams, but I'll also talk to marketing departments as well, because there's such an educational component, not only just crate-free pork, but then giving a good quality of life, giving outdoor access and environmental enrichments are so important to telling that story and demonstrating that transparency across the food system too. I think a lot of consumers are starting to catch on to these claims that are really confusing, and the industry has made it such that when you walk in, you don't really know what natural means. What does humane mean? In reality, there aren't a lot of federal definitions for these kinds of claims. So when we talk about this, I'm always encouraging companies to look also at third-party certifications to verify this humane claim as well. So for example, Niman Ranch has certified humane, and then we also encourage Global Animal Partnership and Animal Welfare Approved because we've identified those as really meaningful in the marketplace. So it really is a spectrum, not only from external stakeholders and internal investors, but then the consumer all the way down, and how companies are responding to this drive to improve animals in their supply chain.
Okay, Vontae.
So what I'll share is very much a reflection of what's already been shared. So at ButcherBox, been working really closely with our procurement team to really identify, what are the principles that we're utilizing to make the sourcing decisions that we make. ButcherBox has partnered with Niman for a long time on pork product, but we also source beef, chicken, seafood, and what are the values, as Chris talked about, that we're going to hold constant across sourcing across all these different proteins across many different vendors. And so humane animal welfare has been a key pillar of how we've sourced really since the beginning of the organization. And as Chris said, there is a necessity to maintain that principle when costs go up, when there are different supply chain shortages or just different demands on the business. How do you continue to kind of hold true to the values and principles that you set out as an organization? And then I would say the other piece of it, touching on what Julia shared, is really identifying the right partnerships. So we have with ButcherBox have third-party humane animal welfare certifications to audit, verify across our supply chain, and also partnering with these organizations on policy, on charitable giving, to continue to ensure that farmers who want to have infrastructure to do more humane animal practices, that they have grants to support that, or farmers who want to apply to participate in certified humane audit and certification, that they could potentially get those certifications for free through our support.
All three of you just give me so much inspiration and hope. So I just want you guys to know that. And we're running out of time, so we're going to go lightning round for this one. What does the pork industry look like in a perfect world? I want each of you to share your vision on that. Let's start with Chris.
All right. In a perfect world, I think it's crate-free, and I'm willing to settle for gestation crate-free because I think that practice is the one that I struggle with the most.
I'm going to go further, Chris. I want more farmers and less confinement when it comes to bottlenecking the industry. So more farmers and animals outside.
Okay, Avante.
Thanks for going first. I'm like, I need time to think. So, one topic I think this panel hasn't touched on yet is diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think I would love to see just increase in the diversity of farmers who are raising pigs. And then also more, I think, maybe a vision of what environmental sustainability looks like alongside those animal welfare practices would be my dream, layering on top of what was shared.
Perfect. And yeah, looks like we're out of time, folks. So let's give this one, yeah, let's give them a hand. Yeah, appreciate you guys. Yes.
Much, Ty. That was wonderful. Thanks to all of the panelists. We're now going to play 2 videos, one shared by U.S. Congressmember Randy Feenstra, representing Iowa's 4th District, and another from U.S. Congressmember Ashley Hinson, who represents Iowa's 1st District. Before we play these, I want to say that these videos might be a little controversial for some of you, especially what we've just heard on this panel, especially from Chris Oliviero. I want you to know that our team really appreciates and values the diversity of conversation, opinions, and values, but ultimately know that Niman Ranch has a really unique voice where others do not. Both Food Tank and Niman Ranch are bipartisan. It's been really, really important for me and my co-founder, Bernard Pollock, who's in the back of the room, to do that from the beginning. We want to be in the center, and we want to hear from as many voices as possible. The same is true with Niman. With over 700 independent family farmers and ranchers, they hear a lot of different opinions, and they value them. And so I appreciate everyone in this room, your respect for that variety of opinions, and we're really excited that we're able to support family farmers through this event, but we're also so grateful that there are so many diverse viewpoints on the things that we're talking about. So enjoy the videos with that sort of, I've really geared you up for it, haven't I?
Hi, I'm Congressman Randy Feenstra, here representing Iowa's 4th District. In Iowa, our economy is powered by our family farmers and independent producers who are the breadbasket to the world. Because of your hard work, Iowa produces nearly 25 million hogs every year, generating $13 billion to our state's economy and $2 billion to our exports alone. In Congress, I'm committed to defeating California's Prop 12 bacon ban, cutting EPA's red tape, and opening more export markets for your quality products. Additionally, I'm working hard to ensure our pork producers have a voice at the table when it comes to writing and passing the 2023 Farm Bill. Our family farms and independent producers are the lifeblood of Iowa and our rural economy. As your voice in D.C., I will always protect your right to make an honest living and to preserve our shared rural Iowa values.
Well, hi there, everyone. Congresswoman Ashley Hinson here. I wish I could be with you all in person for the 24th annual Niman Ranch Hog Farmer Appreciation Celebration. In Iowa, our agriculture producers go above and beyond to feed and fuel the world, and Niman hog farmers have played a huge part in our great state's agricultural success as the #1 hog producing state in the country. I talk a lot about that here in DC. Hundreds of Niman hog farmers across our state are working around the clock to get that top of the line made in Iowa product right to kitchen tables across the country. And when you see the Niman brand on a menu or in a store, you know it's gonna be good. So here in Congress, I am working to help support Iowa hog and family farmers by ensuring that they have the tools that you need to continue to succeed for generations to come. And so that's why I am pushing back against heavy-handed regulatory policies, things like WOTUS, coming from Washington bureaucrats who have probably never stepped foot on an Iowa farm. So that's also why I introduced the EATS Act, which would work to stop states like California from dictating how our Iowa farmers can raise hogs. So I am so grateful for our Iowa farmers who do feed and fuel the world. Here in Washington, I will always make sure Iowa agriculture has a strong seat at the table. So I hope you have a wonderful time today. I can't wait to see you all soon in person. It is a true honor to represent you in Washington, D.C.
Round of applause. Thanks for your patience again today. So I'm really excited for this next panel, and I want to introduce our panelists. First, we have Chef Stephen Jones, the owner of The Larder in the Delta, which is this amazing Southern cuisine restaurant in Phoenix, Arizona, which I'll be in Phoenix soon, so I can't wait.
Awesome. Give me a call.
I will. We're also joined by Michelle Sanchez, a senior trainer and regional sales manager with Niman Ranch. Nice to see you, Michelle. And we have Dawn Sherman, who you met earlier this morning with her wonderful land acknowledgement, who is the CEO of Native American Natural Foods Tonka Bar. So I'm so grateful that they can all be here today. And Michelle, I want to start with you. You have this really wonderful family who have instilled this sense of passion in everything you do, from being an athlete to your work in butcher shops, here at Niman, doing all these incredible things. And I'm wondering if you can talk about how your grandfather's sort of history and legacy has influenced you and your history and legacy.
My grandfather, he was a big influence in my life. When I was a little girl, he would take me to his workplace. And I don't know if any of you guys have ever been to San Francisco to the St. Francis Yacht Club in the marina, but my grandfather was kind of like the food and beverage manager and the event manager of that. And he was there when it was first built, and when it burnt down, and when it was rebuilt. And he would take me around the kitchen, and he would take me around everywhere, And I kind of got a good little taste of that at a young age. And also, he would, I didn't realize how gangster my grandfather was. This guy was it. Because he also was the coordinator of all for the Bohemian Grove way back in the 60s and 70s, mainly. And he was in charge of all the butlers and all the valets at that time. And so, and when he passed away in the 80s, I just never knew, how gangster he was. He knew so many senators, and he had, presidents, and I don't know if you guys know about the Bohemian Grove, but it was pretty wild back in those days. And so he was just hush hush. I never
kept all the secrets.
Yeah, right. I'm sure he's seen a lot. I just never knew. But when he passed away, so the St. Francis Yacht Club, they took care of everything for him. And when we had the reception for him, it was at the St. Francis Yacht Club, and that's where I met so many senators and diplomats and stuff, and just they spoke so highly of my grandfather back then.
No, it's so great that they really that he sort of instilled that love of the culinary arts in you, and that you've used it in so many phases of your life. And we can get back to that in a minute. But thank you for sharing that and how gangster your grandpa was. It's so awesome. Dawn, the Tonka Bar is such an amazing product, and I wonder what inspired the creation of it. And how, through producing this bar, you've been able to keep the traditional practices that your community has, preserved for centuries around food preservation and around food preparation.
just kind of like what we're seeing here is food brings stories and it brings people together. It nourishes the soul. And being Indigenous, I mean, what we did with the Tonka Bar was use a recipe that we already know. So how do you introduce healthy foods back into your community? So you use recipes that they're familiar with, flavors that they're familiar with, that we've been using for thousands of years. So when we said we created a Tonka Bar, and our community is like, oh, it's wasna. Okay, wasna means all mixed up. So we take the meat, we take the berries, we pound them together, put them with the organ fat, and then that's how you preserve the meat over the years. So we just took that recipe and modernized it. So Mark and Carlene had this great idea to turn it into a bar, and everything kind of histories from there, creating a category in a grocery store. How do you create a category out of the Pine Ridge Reservation, where you have all the benefits of the isolation, but also all the negative parts of being isolated in a rural community. So not knowing what a great product we made, you do that. So it's just using the knowledge you already have. So what we did is you look back in order to protect your future, because those practices have already been done. All that stuff has been done. We know it. It's been thousands and thousands of years.
Sure.
So you just move that forward. The answer isn't some magic pill or anything like that, right? It's going back to your roots. It's going back to your people. It's going back to your culture. Your grandpa, they bring that stuff forward. So you got to look back in order to heal the future.
Yeah, I love that idea of going forward by looking back and storytelling. And, I know that's so important for the work that you do, telling stories, creating this narrative through food that is so beautiful but inclusive, and it expresses the diversity of cultures and people who've led to where we are now. And I'm wondering how consumers go to restaurants because they want a tasty meal, but you also want to provide them with a story. That's difficult.
Extremely difficult. I mean, it's the number one challenge I face in Phoenix, in downtown Phoenix, in an area that was so barren for so long, to now we're seeing, development after development, and ASU their numbers are always things. So all this diversity now is coming down to downtown Phoenix, and we're seeing that. So us telling the story at the restaurant is very, very important to me and to us, but it is a challenge.
So, you're in Phoenix, and it's, I'm wondering, you're creating all this wonderful Southern food, but you want to also honor the producers that are in Arizona. And how do you reconcile those two things?
I walk a fine line. I walk a fine line because, on any given day, I'll have a farmer call me, or some rep or someone will get upset because I switched to this, or I did this, or I did that, or I did that. I'm like, just hold on. It's okay. It's okay. So,
sure.
We benefit. I mean, I change the menu quite often. I mean, it drives me nuts.
Sure.
Change it too much a little bit sometimes,
sure.
But it drives me nuts. So we're able to, with that change, allows us to continue the story, to tell a new story, to tell a new challenge, or whatever it may be.
And keeps that diverse group of farmers that we've been hearing about involved.
Exactly.
And excited about what you do.
Excited about it. I geek out. I like to see them geek out. They'll come in and they'll geek out. It happened the day before I came out here.
Sure.
I literally someone was dining in the restaurant. I'm like, hey, chef, I want to introduce you to somebody. I'm like, okay. And this woman and her boyfriend, they have a quail farm. I was like, a quail farm? What? I mean, first of all, one of the things, quail is great. I love quail, but you go to Texas where it's hunted, other places like that where people hunt for it. But in Phoenix, quail is just running around everywhere.
Sure.
So people just make them their friends. So you put it on the menu, and people get pissed. I
want to eat my friend.
How many times people have been like, no, chef. I'm like, so, but she has the local quail. I was so stunned and surprised, and she brought me the product, and we tasted it, and I was like, this is crazy. And she's doing really interesting stuff with it. She brought me quail necks. I was like, quail, what? What do you, a quail neck? But it was
this big?
It was like this big, and it was a bag, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm gonna do with it, but I'm gonna try to find something to do. But it's those things, and talking to her, and then she just emailed me this morning, sent me a whole sheet of stuff to look at, but she has a story and the reason why she got into it and things of that nature. And then when I get back, she's going to make the menu and we're going to talk about it.
That's so great. Thank you for sharing that. So Donna and Michelle, again, I don't always know how to phrase these questions that well, but you have both experienced being women in the food industry, and we've been talking about inclusion and diversity all morning, but we're still facing issues about women in the food industry, right? It's very hard for women to get the respect that they deserve. Often they are the idea makers behind so many of the products that we see out there. So can you talk about your experiences as, folks who have fought the good fight for a long time, and now, are leaders in food business. These are, steps that were very difficult to take. Michelle, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, so I was very fortunate. When I started, honestly, to kind of get my chops, was over at, I first started with Elka Gilmore over at the Village Pub, and that was located in Woodside, in California. And she was all about empowering women, really developing women in their skill, in their craft. And I was just so fortunate that at the restaurant that I was working at, when the sous chefs left the job and told me about Elka, and I went over there. And so we worked with her for a few years, and then we opened up Elka in San Francisco. And in there was tremendous. My gosh, that was just such an awesome experience because of all the deep talent that was there.
Sure.
So we recruited basically Tracy Desjardins from Patina back then, and she was Elka's sous chef at the time. And then we had Elizabeth Faulkner and Alicia Takoya come over from Massa's back then, and then they were our pastry team. And then, we started, doing some really wonderful stuff. And you talked about fusion earlier, right? And we were really at the cutting edge of French and Japanese. So Japanese food, French food, both with, French techniques and twists to it. And we were really at the forefront of that type of cuisine back then.
Yeah.
And so we just, the whole camaraderie, the teamwork, really elevating, pushing other women. And so we started to get a lot more women coming to our kitchen because of the buzz, the word.
It's a great sisterhood.
Yes, very much so. And also then, so we attracted Dominic Kren. That came in, and back then she just came in with braces and a bushy, ponytail, cutest thing, and but the talent was just so deep.
Sure.
But the guys, okay, it was old school back then, and I have to say it was kind of rough too. You had to prove, you don't prove with your mouth. You prove in your dishes. Yeah. And that once you prove yourself with your dishes and all your mise en place and everything, and the respect is being earned. Sure. And so they can't come up to you when you're just putting out excellent stuff. You're challenging them. Right?
Absolutely.
So it was kind of interesting back then.
I bet.
But I do know that there's been lots and lots of challenges, in my earlier career as well. Women have to prove themselves 10 times more than a guy.
Yeah, still. And Don, I saw you nodding a lot. And so to bring the Tonka Bar to fruition and to do Native American natural foods and to, instill this respect of buffalo and to carry it on, these are difficult things to do for anyone, but I think especially hard for women in this space. And I'm wondering if you could talk about what you've experienced.
Yeah. It has been challenging being a woman. And, I got my chops in the car business, so if you guys aren't familiar with it, in a previous life I did that. So having to crawl with a bunch of men out on the car lot and watching them fisticuffs in the back alley and trying, doing that. So I, really thick skin. I got in the food industry. It was no different. It was exactly the same. And I'm sorry, I'm gonna offend some people, but it's all white guys. And being a woman of color coming into a meat industry is really tough, really tough. So you just got to stand your ground with them. But we've had obstacles like that. Having to bring in another male to help with a co-packer, for example, because they're used to speaking to men in the industry, so they have a little bit more respect because they understand what they're talking about. You don't really know what's going on in the meat industry, even though I could break down a bison faster than they could. And so they're, you know, so it's the same thing. Being a woman, all you women out here understand, you have to prove yourself. And it was hard for me to start with in the industry because our culture is women-led. Women lead. Women, you know, they do everything. We build the houses.
Right.
We cook the food. We do, you know, even do the hunting. We're the ones that cut down the bison when the men went hunting. The men didn't cut it up. The women did. We skinned it. We did all of that. So doing that and then switching into a colonial part of it where the men are the leaders, that they know what to do. It's difficult sometimes,
Sure.
but we're in this movement now in the food industry, food sovereignty, food industry, have the chefs, what the chefs are doing with everything has been amazing as we move forward. And I see a lot of opportunity, and I don't see it as much, but it still is there. You know, it's still there. You just gotta fisticuffs, right?
Keep fighting the good fight.
A lot better though.
It is.
I do. Oh yeah.
Sure.
Way better. Way better.
That's good to hear, and I hope it continues. That's what we need. We need more diversity, inclusion, equity, all, you know, food justice, all of those things need to be part of this food system of the future. Otherwise, we're not going to do all the things that we want to do, including solve the climate crisis. So in the few minutes we have left, and Dre, can we add one more minute to this panel since I'm going to go over a little bit? This question is for you all, and Dawn mentioned, you know, colonialism, but when we use food to honor our past, how can we balance that desire to be true to painful histories of slavery and colonialism while also celebrating people and cultures and who have persisted and thrived and survived in these difficult situations? Because that's, you know, I think that's the question. How can we honor the past? How can we move forward? How can we get to this system that we really want?
Well, I don't think the only way to truly honor your ancestors and honor these atrocities that happen and all these moments in time that happen is to not forget them, to talk about them. It is okay to talk about these situations because they actually did happen.
Right.
And that's what I do on the regular. That's what many chef friends of mine as well do. And we just talk about it. And through education and working our way through it is the only way to show the true honor. And when we go out there, we work hard, whether it be through sourcing, whether it be through growing it yourself, raising it yourself, and just treating the product right and treating the culture right, and understanding the respect for your ancestors, for the people that came before you. You know, we're riding on their shoulders.
Right.
So it's very, very important that we tell the story appropriately and not sugarcoat it.
And what white folks need to understand, at least from my perspective as a person living in a white body, we need to feel more uncomfortable than we already do. Okay, because there's a lot of stuff that has gone down that we have chosen to ignore, and we can't do that anymore.
No, the time for ignoring it, which that's a whole different subject in itself, it has come and gone. And it's something that in Phoenix we do. I get in trouble for it, but at the end of the day, I really don't care.
Right.
I don't. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is the actual truth about it, and then we move on, and people are beginning to appreciate it and know and know. You know, I've gotten so many more apologies, which I don't understand, but it's okay. It's okay.
People don't know what to say.
Yeah, I don't know what to say. Like I don't do it with my hands. You know, one of those type of situations. And but it's to say it's okay isn't the right word, but it is okay.
Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it, Dawn.
Yeah, sorry. I was all into.
I know.
I repeat exactly what he said.
I've kind of forgotten my question too after that.
Authenticity.
Yeah.
Telling your story, telling your history. And I didn't get a chance to say, but part of our story, you know, is we are of the buffalo. Our people were created from the buffalo. So we emerged as buffalo, and then they feed. They're our life givers. So to honor those ancestors, you know, that's our brother, that's our sister, that's our grandma, that's our grandpa. So when we're sending that animal there, we're telling that story. So it's not just, it's a head, it's, you know, a hoof, you're getting this, you're getting that, and all the pieces. it's, you know, that is our relative. So to tell that story and be authentic about who you are, where your food comes, is where the forefront of the people are moving. And, you know, I feel that that's, you know, part of Tonka's success was
Absolutely.
Where the story that we have and the authenticity that we bring forward.
Absolutely. Thank you. Michelle, you're all about authenticity, and so is Nyman. You have the final word. We're over time. I'm just warning you.
Get him.
No pressure, right? Authenticity and well, you know, you talk about honoring food in history and such, and you know, I think I do it like every single time when my friends come over, every single time when I have my family come over, and I want to make them food from here.
Yeah.
You know, because when it comes from here, it just seems a little better. You know, it just seems, you know, you can taste that love, and you can taste all the history behind it. Because when you cook from love, or when you work from love, you can't help but be infectious with everybody. And so when they taste it, they're tasting love all the way. So.
Amazing point to end on. Thank you so much. I wish we had more time. Thank you so much. Incredible panel. Before we turn, sorry, I keep messing up words today. Before we turn to our final panel of the morning, we have a video montage. Don't worry, it's not controversial. I don't have to warn you. There's no warning before it. Great, right? So wonderful to see all that. I'm glad we get to close out before lunch. I know I'm keeping you from food, but you can be patient. We have this wonderful closing fireside with young farmers, and I've known both of them for a while, but one much longer, and they are so dedicated to their craft, to their work, and so I'm so honored to share the stage with Ellie Gadent and Joelle Guindo because of all the work that you do to make Nyman successful and to make your own farm successful. So thank you for being here. Can we give them a round of applause even before they speak? So Ellie, I've known you for a while now. I feel like I've watched you sort of progress in your career, and it's been really amazing to watch. And you've been a part of the Nyman Ranch network and family for such a long time. And I'm wondering if you can talk about how you first became involved when you were growing up with Nyman.
Yes. What an honorable welcome, too. Thank you, Danny.
You know I love you.
Oh, I love you, too. My family raises pigs in eastern Iowa. We're about 20 minutes from the Mississippi River. We raise pigs that we sell now to Nyman Ranch, but throughout my life, we were already raising pigs the Nyman Ranch way without Nyman Ranch. And then in 2008, we joined the network. We're involved throughout. And then when I was in college, I was a recipient of the Next Generation Foundation scholarships. And this is an incredible scholarship program that Nyman Ranch has to support the children and family members and Nyman Ranch farmers themselves, but all of Nyman Ranch farmers and farm families. And then, so I was a recipient throughout college, and then my senior year, I was the top scholarship recipient, the Phyllis Willis Pioneer Award, which is in honor of the late Phyllis Willis, who's the co-founder of Nyman Ranch. And through that led me to an internship on the Nyman Ranch communications team. And then from there, we created the position they created for me, the farmer advocate. And now I get to support not only my family, but the 700 family farmers in the Nyman Ranch network.
It's so cool. It's so cool. And we'll come back to your family in a second. And Joelle, you're also from a really wonderful farming family, but they didn't raise pigs. And so I wonder when you came to this country, what made you want to raise pigs?
Well, for me at that time, well, my parents, we had dairy cows. And, just finished up coming out of college. And I needed something that would be easy for me to get into the business. And cows, I just didn't have enough money to buy a cow. It takes a long time. So when I think of all the money I need, and I'm like, well, I can buy 4 piglets
right.
for $50 each and raise those ones and start breeding those. And I thought that would be a more lucrative way to start up. And I've always liked pigs, but my dad was just not into pigs. He just like, no. So we had a little bit of everything. We had chickens, ducks, goats, but we had cows, so we'll milk cow in the morning and in the evening. But pigs, he was just not very excited about pigs. So now, since I was old, I can make my own decisions. I can do what I want. It's like, finally. Well, I got pigs, and really, the person who really got him into pigs, my friend Benny, was raising pigs at that time in Brookings. I've known him at that time, and I would help them sometime when they need help. And he was talking about pigs, and when they went and bought their own farm, I rented the area that he used to raise pigs, and that's kind of how I started.
Sure. Yeah. Joelle, it sounds kind of easy when you describe it. Like, I bought these 4 pigs, I did it. But you faced a lot of obstacles and barriers, and I want to hear about those because those are important for all of us to know about. All as eaters, the young farmers in the room, we need to know about those challenges.
Well, the beginning, I guess the main challenge for me was finding a place to farm. I came here in the U.S., I only had 2 bags and $200. And that I had that big dream. I really wanted to farm, but then when one speaker he spoke about, all the money that you need to start the business.
Sure.
Farming is a really capital-intensive business. You need $1 million to put a building. You need a lot of money just to start it up.
Sure.
And that you have, thinking of all the risks that coming up with that, it just doesn't make sense for someone like me. So that was the biggest challenge at this time, and also finding a place, an area so I can actually do it.
Absolutely.
So I feel fortunate. I'm very thankful that after 6-7 years, finally I was able to find a place to rent, and slowly building up like that. And I was selling to the farmers market. I was driving, I would say maybe 50 miles around the area. Delivering products to the farmers market, to restaurants and local retail stores.
Sure.
And the farm was in a different area where we live, so I will drive there about 15 miles away to do my chores in the morning and go back to work another 10 miles and come back again, collect eggs and do all the chores and go back home, clean them. So it was constant from every day.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And so for you both, Niman has this system of farmer field agents that really work to help you. And you as a farmer advocate, work to help farmers. How do those farmer field agents for you both, affect your families? What do you learn from them?
So for me, it was very helpful. At the beginning, like I said, I was the first one raising pigs. So I can't say I knew a lot about pigs. I knew, a little bit. And I knew maybe the right way to raise them. I know I didn't want to I want to make sure they have access to the outdoor.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was, I think about maybe 2 years into doing it, I was at that point, I want to scale up and grow. But I was able to do for 2 years with a limited knowledge, and of course I had help kind of training me, but the field agents really helped me kind of guide me and the decision making and talking about feed. And I had a lot of questions. I have this thing, farrowing, and a bunch of other things. So it was very helpful. The field agents came and visit the farm, Ben was the guy who was the field agent who came to visit me.
That's great.
Back then, you guys know Ben right now, but back then when he used to drive a stick shift and the truck and has beard. Now it's different. He's a big guy now. But he came to visit, so I knew him before I started raising. So he came and he told me about Naiman. He said, Joe, it would be a great fit for you because you're already doing a lot of things that Naiman really wants. And so it was just a right fit. What they believe and what I believe about how animals should be raised, I really like it, and I thought it would work really well at that time. So that was 6 years ago.
Wow,
Yep.
that's amazing.
And they have been help in the beginning was such a great experience with them.
Yeah, it's
Yep.
incredible.
Yep.
Ellie, how do those farmer field agents help your family? And by the way, I was walking with Ellie yesterday, and when she talks about her family, it's gonna make me cry. When she talks about her family and the farm, like she literally glows. Like she just like gives off like just the greatest vibe of all time. So I want to thank you for that because it made me really happy yesterday. But you know, those farmer field agents really they're integral to this whole system that Naiman has constructed.
They are, and the support from the field agents is just incredible. They come out to our farms regularly and are walking through the pigs with us on really hearing how we're raising the pigs and any challenges we're facing. They're there to help us through it. And what's so great is they're working with numerous other Naiman Ranch farmers that have a similar farm to us. So if you're having you're wanting to improve your feed or a nutrition, they have the resource that, I was just at this farmer's place and they just started working with a new nutritionist and are having great luck. Maybe you want to try this. And then they have the phone numbers too. When we're on the farm, sometimes you forget that, you're isolated in a way. You're working, you're really dedicated to what you're doing, but that there's so many other people in our community doing this too, and the field agents are a great resource to connect us with those fellow farmers.
Absolutely, and it means a lot to your family to be part of this network where they don't feel isolated.
Yes, it does. And another thing with our field agent, several of the field agents, but ours he grew up as a Naiman Ranch farmer and raised pigs of his own and was a scholarship recipient too. And to have that institutional knowledge in a way,
sure.
But just all of his experience really is unmatched, and just how powerful Naiman Ranch really is that both Anthony, who's our field agent, and I, too, the impact Naiman Ranch has made for us and for our families, that we want to be involved so we can continue that for others.
Absolutely. I want to talk about that isolation a little bit more. We're talking about rural communities where you don't always see your neighbors all the time. So having the connection to Naiman Ranch is very important. So you can call another farmer who's part of the Naiman Ranch network and get advice. You can call your field agent. Joelle, do you want to comment on why that's important to have that community, especially for somebody who's coming from a totally different background of raising, dairy and other livestock, not pigs? It's really important to have that network.
Yeah, it's very important. I know, especially early on, I really used that a lot. I was calling almost very frequently with questions. And following time, I have something going on with my sows, and they usually knows what's going on. I've reached out to I know, actually one time I was delivering hogs to Sioux Prime, and my trailer tire went away, and I was able to call, and they reached the farmer that are around there, and were just calling me, you need any help? And so that was really very good to know that, I was stuck out there, it was raining,
sure.
and they were able to come and help me out, so that was pretty good.
Can you both talk about that kind of support, because we're still in the pandemic, right? But at the very early days of the pandemic, I can imagine that being able to contact Naiman and have someone like you who's a farmer advocate, sort of, this was an emergency, and farmers were facing a lot. How did that all work?
With Naiman Ranch, we were really blessed during the pandemic because as the industry was facing issues with getting into the plant or not buying pigs, Naiman Ranch, we have this incredible stability with Naiman Ranch. Naiman Ranch still bought every pig from the farmers, and we were still bringing farmers, young beginning farmers on and offering that support through the community. We started having virtual meetings because we traditionally have meetings throughout the year where farmers get together. We have education during them, but it's so much more than just education. It is that community and sharing ideas with each other. So through the pandemic, we learned new ways on how to connect. But the stability, I think that's part of it. The stability of Niman Ranch with the niche market, but just the stability of a community and people who are so willing to help you.
Yeah. No, I mean, Joelle, you know how helpful that is to have, you can call somebody, and they'll drive however many miles to come get you. No, it's great. It's great. I wonder, Joelle, for you during the pandemic, how that sort of affected your ability to farm and still, be successful.
I will say affected a little bit because most farmers markets were kind of closed because of the pandemics, and a bunch of restaurants and wholesales was locally, they were not really just closed, just limiting the amount of people coming to their stores. So in that section, kind of really affected. But with Niman, I don't think they've changed. They want the same number of pigs I wanted last 2020. I don't think I've had to say, okay, we can't sell enough pigs. Or for me, that remained the same. It's just on other sales for local markets that really was affected because of that.
Sure. It's great that Niman always keeps it consistent, though, and makes sure that the pigs have somewhere to go.
Yep.
Ellie, maybe this is our last question because I don't want to keep people from lunch. You, as we've said before, you're now this farmer advocate with Niman Ranch, and I'm wondering what you've learned during this position and how that's sort of been, brought back to your own work with your family when you're able to visit them, and how you're able to connect so many other farmers with Niman Ranch and sort of spread this again, this great model that Paul and Chris and others have been able to produce.
It is. I really appreciate being part of this great model. Through my position, I'd say the biggest things that I learned are challenges that my family's faced getting into farming, with the land access and getting loans approved as a small farmer, whereas your banker may be comparing what you're proposing to purchase to a large corporate farm, and your numbers aren't comparable there. These are across the board for most farmers, and it's for young farmers, beginning farmers, but really all small and mid-sized farmers are facing challenges.
Yeah.
And during COVID, those were heightened because of the supply chain and rising prices, and the farmers are feeling it also. We have, of course, with Niman Ranch, the stability and the guaranteed price point for our hogs, which is a huge help. But for all of the equipment and the feed that we're putting into our farms, many farms are diversified. Mine is with, we're not only raising hogs, but I'd say most Niman Ranch farmers have other incomes on the farm, like it could be cattle or crops or a job off the farm too. And just feeling the pressure through that, and in a way too, during COVID and through being physician, seeing that how impactful being a part of this community and being a part of a niche market changes everything for the better for us. Yeah. And not just my family, but just there's so many families just like mine. And as a farmer, sometimes when we're feeling isolated, wow, this is really overwhelming, but we're not alone.
No, you're not alone, and I think that's the Niman model has really made sure that you are all part of a collective that can work with one another and ask questions and be really part of this wonderful community. One of the best parts of my job is getting to talk to folks like you, people who are younger than me, who I learn from, inspire me, and just give me so much hope. So thank you for what you do for your communities, for food production, and for the world. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Let's give them a round of applause. You can stay right here. Before we break for lunch, I want to give a huge, huge thank to the Niman Ranch team, including Ellie Gaden and Carrie McClyman, who have made all of what you're seeing today possible. It wouldn't be possible without them. So a round of applause, please. We have food tank folks on the ground, including my co-founder, Bernie Pollock. And honestly, none of these events that Food Tank does would be possible without him, because I just wouldn't get up. I wouldn't go on stage, so he makes me, and I really appreciate it. I want to thank the Marriott staff, I guess, again, especially their food staff, for hosting today's event, and our amazing production teams, Encore and Mode. They're just wonderful. For those of you who are in the room today and not watching online, we have an incredible lunch plan for you. Sorry, everyone watching online. Niman Ranch's executive chef, Andrew Hunter, decided to take on a really almost impossible challenge of preparing the best pork tenderloin sandwich, which you all know is an Iowa classic, using Niman Ranch pork. So I think you're all going to enjoy it. And I know Chef Hunter is going to do an amazing job. So thanks to all of you who tuned in virtually. We really appreciate it. Continue to use the hashtag HFAD, HFAD, and share your thoughts and comments. And we'll see everyone back in person in this very room at 1:05. So go eat quickly. Thanks, everyone.